This episode is sponsored by Team Builder, yet another company that's doing great things for the first responder community. As a strength and conditioning coach myself who also trains tactical athletes, dissemination of wellness information is one of the biggest challenges. Now, Team Builder is the premier strength and conditioning software for tactical athletes, and there are several features that really impress me. Firstly, there is a full exercise library, so you, the personal trainer, does not have to create that within your own department. Secondly, you can send out programming, but also individualize, which I love. So you blanket program for everyone. Now you can tweak based on someone's injury, someone's need to maybe drop some body composition, rather than having to write a program for every single person on their own. Team Builder also allows you to build custom questionnaires to collate health and wellness data. It integrates with wearables. And I think one of the most important things is obviously it tracks. To me, it's imperative that we as a profession start tracking our people from day one and then over the full span of their career, therefore catching potential wellness issues and injuries before they happen. Now, if you want to try Team Builder, they are offering you, the audience of the Behind the Shield podcast, a free 14-day trial to experience all of the features. And if you want to take a deeper dive into Team Builder, listen to episode 1032 with Melissa Mercado, or go to teambuilder.com. And I'll spell that to you because it's not as you'd think, teambuildr.com. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show martial artist and stuntman Justin Eaton. Now, in this conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from his journey into the world of gymnastics, his martial arts journey, transitioning into the world of stunt performing, Marvel movies, The Fall Guy, the power of storytelling, family dynamics in the entertainment industry, the future of television, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of well over 1,200 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Justin Eaton. Enjoy. Well, Justin, I want to start by saying two things. Firstly, thank you to my former guest, your friend, Ben Jenkin, for making this connection. And secondly, I want to welcome you onto the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, James. And a big thank you to Ben for connecting us, for sure.
So very first question, where on planet Earth are we finding you this morning?
This morning, I am in Astoria, New York. I've been here since March, working on an Apple project with an amazing team of people and some of the most seasoned crew I think I've ever worked with, which has been really cool. But yeah, I've been up here since March and be down here for a few more months.
Now, obviously, we can't talk about what you're working on, but it's interesting. A friend of mine was just about to shoot his film in New York, and he told me of the idiosyncrasies of that city specifically, and obviously a very union strong area to try and shoot in this environment, which I'm sure we'll get to, where, you know, the film and television industry is changing. So how is shooting in New York different to other locations that you've worked on before?
I think the shorter list is how similar they are, as opposed to how different they are. It's very interesting. I had shot here before. I had been up here to do when Marvel was with Netflix, and they were doing their series of shows with Daredevil and Punisher and all of those. But even since then, it does feel different coming back. That was 10 years ago, probably. And so we've run into a lot of things that, not having shot here consistently, we felt like were pretty standard because just about everywhere else in the country that they are. Um, but yes, we've definitely run into, we certainly have run into the union thing, and we totally understand, especially you're shooting around train tracks, you're shooting in historical areas. The last thing we want to do is come in and destroy those things. My wife and I are huge fans of history and architecture, and so we ourselves are like, no, 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 let's not damage anything. But there's a little bit of a middle ground, I think, that sometimes we miss. But it's its own challenge shooting in New York for sure. And there's reasons for it. It's so busy. It's so busy. Some of the busiest sets I've ever been on. Only now those are just the pedestrians that are watching you shoot, and there's hundreds of people, and they're all trying to go through their own day. They're trying to get to the train stop. They're trying to get to work, and so yeah, it's its own beast for sure. You have to prepare yourself a little differently to shoot in New York.
Yeah. I know when I watch a lot of the James Bond films, I'm amazed how they actually pull off some of the exterior shots, some of the chases that are shot in London, because as you said, that's a lot of pissed off people that are trying to get to work that have to kind of divert around now.
We've had a few. You always hope that it never goes that way, but sometimes people feel inconvenienced enough that you need to have a little extra security around, and we've certainly taken some of those precautions shooting here.
All right. Well, I would love to start at the very beginning of your timeline. So tell me where you were born, and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
Okay. I was born in Lawrence, Massachusetts, which has gone through many facelifts, I feel like, since I came to be there. It was not a wonderful neighborhood. It had a lot of its own struggles. I have two older sisters. I'm the youngest. We started in an apartment building in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and I have one of my very first vivid memories, and this will directly go into my appreciation for what you do for firefighters. And one of my first vivid memories is me sitting in the back seat of my mom's blue Volvo. I'm still in a car seat, and so this is just like a flash. And I remember there was a stop sign at the end of our street, and this building right next to us was our apartment complex. And I remember we were there, and it was really bright and really orange. And I remember looking over, and the whole building is engulfed in flames. And that was one of three fires that affected my family, but were not connected to my family, if that makes sense. In the apartment building, someone fell asleep with a cigarette. The whole place went up. Insurance was not our friends, and so my parents struggled a lot to make sure that they could take care of us and get us into a safer neighborhood and school system. We moved to Londonderry, New Hampshire, which is a real place. Londonderry, New Hampshire, into a duplex up there, and we had a similar kind of little fire thing. Neighborhood wasn't super safe, and so parents again tried to move us into somewhere that was a little better for us. And we ended up in Methuen, Massachusetts. Shout out to Methuen. There's not a lot of people that even know that that's a place. But yeah, ended up in a duplex there, and again, family on the other side. We ended up having a huge fire. Luckily, fire department was able to keep that damage to a minimum, and so I have to give you a huge thank you for what you do, because what you do has directly affected my family in a very positive way. So much love to all our firefighters out there. Thank you.
It's interesting. I was in a house fire when I was 4 years old, trapped in a house fire. My sister, who was 8, initially couldn't get us out the house, and then eventually she went to call for help, and this was on the kind of old rotary phones. No one picked up, so she went back down and pulled on the door, and it did open. But I mean, when I look back now and I remember how soot covered we were, like we almost died in a house fire. And I became a firefighter. So it goes to show it can either drive you to be terrified of a thing, or in a strange, bizarre way, do the opposite. Now, I know that you've done a lot of fire burns yourself. Do you ever reflect back to how many times you were exposed to fire, but you ended up voluntarily setting yourself on fire?
I think I probably should have. Any good bit of healthy fear would say that. But no, it's funny. I hadn't really until you really just said that. Only because the approach to, as you know, the approach to fire on set, is very different. It's very. I've been fortunate enough, at least, to work with people that are very regimented and very on top of their game. Their entire team, it's like they all know sign language without using their hands. They don't have to speak. Everyone's on the same page, and it's approached the same way every time. But it's funny that you mentioned that. I hadn't really made as much of the correlation as I probably should have. I definitely know that it informed me in the sense of being a far safer person, generally speaking, because it showed me how quickly the one thing you might not have thought of is the thing that spirals everything out of control. So it certainly informed me at a young age to see an emergency, not to freak out, and just go through the steps. Follow whatever procedure you can, and whatever actions need to be made. If you can do them, do them. Because that's who you guys are. The people will talk about stunt people, in whatever kind of phrase they want, but I hold you guys so much higher above any kind of standard you could give to people, because to just look at a huge situation like that for your job, like clock in and you're looking at this thing and go, might not make it out, and the first thing you do is step towards it. I have all the respect in the world. It's very, very, very cool. Very cool.
Well, what's interesting is I did stunts the whole time I was a firefighter, and as I said on the phone the other day, I did theme park stunts, so I'm not comparing myself to the stunts in The Fall Guy, for example. But when I would be at the fire department, my friends were in awe of the stunt side. When I'd be in the stunt shows, people would be in awe of the fire side. And even within our profession, we have the wildland firefighters that say, "Oh, I'd never go into a building." And then we say, well, I'd never be in a field with a shovel when there's 1,000 acres on fire. So it is interesting how you have this kind of mutual respect from all these different disciplines.
Yeah. Very cool.
So what about profession? What were your parents doing?
Oh, yes. So my dad, a computer programmer, he actually did a lot of, and he still would if he could. He still tries. He did a lot of long distance endurance sports. So my dad did long distance cycling. He did the reverse of what every cyclist does, or long distance endurance runner. They usually will start with running, and then once the knees start to wear out, you start to move to something of lower impact. Well, he started with cycling, blew his knees out, and then started running.
He's like, my knees hurt. I should start running on concrete.
Yeah, this sounds great. So he ran Boston Marathon and things like that. Big endurance sports guy. Strangely enough, has an extremely high motion sickness level. I remember him telling me that he couldn't sit in a swing, like not swinging in a swing, just sitting in a swing would start to make him nauseous. And so every time we would drive somewhere, he had to be either driving or in the front seat staring at the line in the road. So I think that's where the endurance thing came in, focusing on something that isn't moving and changing and just constantly going. And he loved it. Did it for a long time. My mom, we came up, my sisters and I all worked at this catering company at one point or another and did different jobs there. My mom started as it was a catering place, and then they had a function hall. And so all of us kids kind of got up our early jobs were all at this place, either cleaning halls or setting them or serving or bartending or doing landscaping, working water features, whatever it is. And so I learned a lot actually through my mom's job, just about like kind of general things. I find nowadays, with a home of my own, I look at the backyard and I'm like, I get some edging in there. I could do that. Oh, I could put a water feature over there. And so it was very valuable time being spent when I was a kid. And my mom got us involved at a really young age, actually, to make some extra cash. She would fold the napkins for the function hall. But depending on what that weekend was, how many functions and the sizes, that could be thousands of napkins to all just one at a time fold into a shape. And so my mom taught my sisters and I how to fold those napkins. And so at the end of whatever day it was, we'd know to go out to the van and we'd grab these big wicker baskets, which were full of just half folded over clean napkins, and we'd haul them all into the house. And we'd set up all our baskets and we'd put a TV show on and we would all sit there and just fold napkins over and over again. And before we'd have, 2,400 napkins folded and set to go back to the place, because she got money for every napkin that was folded. So she goes, we're all making money together. But yeah, that was mom. Mom always, she held multiple jobs and worked her ass off to make sure that we could have some semblance of a place to be creative and a place to challenge ourselves outside of school. And so what that turned into, my elder sisters, they got into gymnastics, interstate gymnastics, represent. And so when I came along and she was like, okay, I got to put this kid in the sport. What do I do with him? And the gymnastics school was actually like, well, hey, you already have 2 kids coming here. Give it a little discount. Just bring them here. You don't have to make another trip. And so it became the consistency for a long time we'd leave school, we'd get over to gymnastics, and we would be there until 9:30, 10 o'clock, whatever it was at night, whoever had the last class. And we'd go home, go to bed, and we'd do it all over again, which became a wonderful kind of regimen of because I discovered probably too late in life the way that I learn. And it's not really in our standard schooling system. Tangibility, something I can touch and physically do, is the best way for me to learn. And so being able to go from an environment where I was really struggling to kind of pay attention to one that my brain exploded in, was a very smart thing mom did. Just trying to get through school, I think sometimes in difficult school systems can be enough of a challenge, but also when you have, financial struggles or whatever it is, we all deal with, you got to get creative, and mom got creative with it, which was a huge benefit. We started in a little, call it a private school, which was actually just a school that was attached to our church that they had started. And so my graduating class in my first grade year, I think, was like 12 kids, compared to going to my public school system, where my graduating class in high school was like 2,500 or 3,000 kids or something like that, just for senior class. Class sizes average like 35 plus in high school. So that environment for me to try and learn was really tough. And so figuring out really early that I was a physical learner would have been more helpful, but I figured it out eventually.
I was the same. I was a straight C student in school in England, but then when I got into the fire service and I was doing the EMT and then the fire and then ultimately paramedic, it was straight A's. And it wasn't that I was any more intelligent. I just understood why I was in the classroom in the first place.
Yeah, 100%. I got a really great opportunity from someone I actually went to high school with. She went into teaching, and specifically teaching with students that have different disabilities or just learning disabilities, not learning the same way that everyone else learns. And she reached out, and I got the opportunity to speak to them and just kind of talk about how it can be your superhero, your superpower, as it were. It doesn't have to be something that debilitates you because you see things a little differently or receive them differently. That's an angle not everybody has, and so that was something that meant a lot to me to be able to do that, because I wish that I had that more when I was a kid. It's not that you're stupid. It's not that you're dumb. You don't understand. You just learn differently. And so feeling like you're just not intelligent is very different from I just learned different. And so that's a really wonderful mindset that I think more people need to adopt. Yeah, we're all different. Brains are fascinating. Bodies are fascinating, and they're all completely different in so many ways. Yeah.
I've had a few people say, that one of the things that's a detriment is that we now classify these learning styles as disorders, ADHD and some of these other things. And some obviously is lack of exercise, some maybe is far too many colorings in their Skittles or whatever it is. And then you have the group of people that are truly, deep in the spectrum that absolutely need the extra care. But there's a lot of people when we classify them, and then we in schools even give them a disability rating, that you're kind of locked in that then, versus, as you said, just seeing it as a different way of learning. As Einstein says, it's like judging a fish's ability to climb a tree. We're not all the same. We're not cookie cutter, So I think there's a lot of people that are on air quotes spectrums that don't need to be. They literally just have a different energy system, a different passion, a different learning style.
Yeah, there was a TED Talk I actually saw many years ago. It was an 11-year-old boy who his parents, within the school system, they're like, our kids are struggling. Let's try to find a different way. And they discovered very early on in his life, he had a huge passion for downhill skiing. He loved skiing. He loved being on the mountain and in the elements. And so they used skiing to teach him all of the other subjects in school. And so having just that basis of going back to that passion, it, like opens up the capillaries and you're receiving that information better. So I just always thought that was fascinating. I wish we had a little bit more of that. But, we do what we can.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the progressive schools are starting to look around the world, Finland and other parts of Scandinavia and Japan, and realizing that there are better ways of doing it than training someone to pass a standardized test so that school can get money. Doesn't seem to be working very well.
Yeah. No, well, and the first things that go out of your school system are the creative things, are the arts, and that it's funny. I'll talk to some of our younger star performers that might be a few years behind me in school, and they'll talk about how we went from this class to this class, and then we had this thing, and that was it. And I was like, did you ever go outside? No. Oh, there was like 2 days a week we do that, or oh, did you ever have any kind of thing? Like, did you ever touch a paintbrush? Did you ever touch a piece of charcoal or a piece of wood? Like anything? Like, oh no. And I remember growing up in real time, seeing those things disappear. My 4th grade year was the last time I remember having an arts class of any real type until high school, which was if you showed massive potential already, you could participate in. But if you just were curious and wanted to learn, there wasn't room for you. Which is tough. So I would love to see an expanse on that everywhere, because I think we have some absolutely beautiful minds out there that just get defeated before they get to blossom, and we could use a little bit more watering and sunlight. Yeah,
couldn't agree more. With the gymnastics, what level did you take that particular sport?
Oh, not far. I did it for, I want to say it was about 7 years. But that started as I call it, an after school program, like they got the cheese set up and you fall, and that's about it. But I made it to the point of competing on their team. Oh, it's been a long time. I did a few years of competition. But ultimately, honestly, the thing that got me out of it, I got out of when I was 12, I'm going to say. I was 12 when I got out of gymnastics, and I was afraid of high bar. I was scared to death of high bar. I loved rings. I loved pommel horse, floor. I loved punching a springboard floor, but high bar scared me. And right around that time, my sisters were getting out. They're like, I'm in high school and I want to do high school things. So they got out of gymnastics, and I was kind of looking at it like, maybe I'll find something else. Cause I was always passionate about it, but it was always partially part of the procedure. When mom only had one place to go with all the kids, it just became a part of the thing. We always went to gymnastics. And so when my sisters started to leave, I kind of was like, maybe this isn't the thing. It kind of lost a little bit of its grip on me, which in hindsight, I'm very grateful for, because it pointed me in other directions that ultimately have led to me having the career that I have. But super grateful to gymnastics. I tell everybody, I think it's a great idea to even just put your kid in gymnastics class once or twice. They absolutely hate it, pull them out. But you can discover so much physically about what you are actually capable of so much sooner in life, which I think is a wonderful thing that can give you a nice settling feeling into yourself a little earlier. Having those physical challenges like that, especially one like gymnastics, which is so intense. But I'm very grateful for my time with gymnastics for sure.
I've had a few people on here that competed at a high level in gymnastics, and it's the same conversation with pretty much almost all the sports that we have here, where there's a fine line between a kid doing a sport and really enjoying it, but also doing other things and being well-rounded, and versus what you see a lot, especially now, where these kids are specialized, and now all they do is that thing. And obviously, for our girls, we know that the young female gymnasts, it stunts their hormonal growth, and it can have a real detriment, and then obviously you've got some of the joint issues. But I think what you said is exactly how it should be used. Yes, if you're a phenom, you might end up going to the Olympics. But for most kids, having a program where you're not forced to only do that thing, but it be one of several things that you do, 100% creates really resilient, well-rounded kids that address some of their fears physically, that understand hard work and discomfort mentally, without being overworked to the point that, as I heard when I first moved to the States, 18-year-olds with blown out shoulders and blown out knees, and so there's that line between performance and longevity, which is sometimes crossed. But I think if we gate back, that gives, as you said, a beautiful opportunity for young people to be well-rounded physically and mentally.
Yeah, and it's so important. It helps with a little bit of identity, even. So after I had finished with gymnastics, I didn't really do much for like a year, and I got a little hefty. I was always kind of a heavier kid, but as soon as I stopped gymnastics, I kind of blew up a little bit. And I know my mom was like, it's not about it's not about having a fat kid, as it were, or having an overweight kid or something like that. I want my child to be healthy. I want my child to not be limited because they physically can't do something. And I think she saw a lot of potential in us, me and my sisters, just to, my mom didn't finish college, but the jobs that she held afterwards were beyond some people that did go to college and get their whole degree and finish everything. And so my mom was just a very much roll your sleeves up and let's figure it out. I don't care that I've never been trained how to do that. There has to be a way to do it. I'll figure it out. And she instilled that in us a lot growing up, which I invaluable to me. It was a very the responsibility is on you. You can always rely on people. You can always try to reach out if you need help. But ultimately, if you can do that thing, put that pressure on yourself to do that. And as you said, there's always moderation to everything. But pushing yourself is the only way you know how far you can go. There's a wonderful quote from a dear friend of mine, Dave McCumber, who's phenomenal stunt coordinator and director of his own. And he goes, "You don't know that doing 100 miles an hour will put you into the wall until you do 100 miles an hour and you hit the wall. So you'll do that turn as quickly as you can. Oh, 80. Oh, I'm okay. 90. Oh, I'm still okay. 100. Oh, okay. Can't do 100 into the wall." And so just through that trial and error, through small ways and independent ways as a kid, are very forming. It's so important. I think about this a lot lately because of social media and screens and things like that. I can't imagine having my own childhood today, just with how much difference there is in so many ways. But I can understand some of the problems and issues and struggles that we run into, because the way you grow up today is completely different from the way that I grew up and the generation before and before that. So yeah, I'm very grateful to Mom for that. Just go figure it out, and if you need help, ask, but go figure it out. There's someone actually asked me, they go, "Was there a time when you knew like stunts was going to be the thing?" And I really didn't know stunts was a job, but there's a particular time. So in the back of the duplex in Methuen, my my folks bought this hand-me-down trampoline for my sister, this 14-foot round trampoline. And we were all so excited, but me the most, the youngest kid. I would set it up every summer, break it down every winter. I lived on that thing. And I remember the back of the house, back of the duplex, the kitchen faced out towards the backyard on our side. And so my mom was doing dishes one day, and I was out there jumping on the trampoline with a friend of mine, and he double bounced me. And this is the edge of the trampoline. I went off. And so from had to be 14, 15 feet in the air, hit the ground, boom, and I bounce off my chest. I remember the feeling, go, go. And I'm on the ground, and I start to kind of push myself up, checking myself, and I hear the back screen door open. And my mom's hanging there. She goes, "You all right?" Yeah, I think so. She goes, "Well, get up, keep playing." She closes the door and she goes back in. But I think that was a little bit of a shock in a good way to me, because I was like, she didn't freak out, so I don't need to freak out. I'm fine. And so I remember that very vividly as a moment of really realizing that, oh, I can take a hit. The parents that run to the child, oh no, and the child starts to freak out even more. My mom was the opposite, the absolute opposite. I did this thing to go where? Right there, and just pokes the thing. But yeah, big props to mom for that. That mind expansion in that one moment. It carries with me to this day.
It's funny because if you talk to kids of firefighters and paramedics, you'll hear the same story. If your leg's not hanging off, then just rub some dirt in it, you'll be fine. Go back and play. But I had that with my son, and he was tiny. He must have been a year and a half, and he had one of those kind of metal Tonka trucks, and he was pushing it along the floor with his butt in the air. And we were getting new carpet put in, so the floor was concrete. And it got away from him, and he just face planted and cried, and again, just like you said, it came over, "You okay? Oh, you're fine. And then he went back and played, and the next morning he had raccoon eyes. I was like, oh shit, yeah, maybe that did hurt, actually. My bad.
What's funny, I did the exact same thing in my grandmother's house when I was a kid, only the carpet was still there. And so when I went out, I slid and I gave myself rug burn all the way up the middle of my face. I can only imagine how he felt that day.
Yeah, exactly. Luckily, he was young enough to be fine. But so you mentioned about leaving gymnastics, and then you said you had about a year. What was the next thing that you found then?
It was martial arts. So I was getting off the bus one day, and a few other kids get off, and this kid Tony Rapazzo, shout out to Tony Rapazzo. He gets surrounded by these three kids, and they're going to jump him. And so at the time, I'm a shaking leaf, and I'm just backing up, and I'm just kind of watching. And he stands his ground with them. They don't end up fighting, but he ends up just being very calm, talking to them, and just kind of talking out of the situation. And they end up leaving. And I was like, wow, that. And we're walking the same direction afterwards. And I was like, that almost was bad. And he goes, almost, but he was a black belt in martial arts. And so he was like, I'm glad it didn't go another way, because I'd rather not use martial arts, because true martial artists don't really want to use it on people unless they have to. And as soon as he said that, I was like, martial arts? And so sure enough, within a few days, I was in Ocasio's True Martial Arts in New England, taking my first little intro class. And then that turned into, that was life-changing. I can't say that I ever stopped, obviously, doing martial arts, but my time there was another just step into a world I didn't know, but immediately was elated with, was so excited by this idea. Because I grew up watching Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles and doing jump split kicks off the couch. And I remember the first time I ever truly racked my head against something was trying to do a back handspring on my couch. And I went right into the arm of the couch. It was the old wooden frame ones. And I was like, but yeah, being able to get involved in that. And then we had a gentleman by the name of Alberto Friedman, who got his black belt and 3 degrees in Japan. He fought for the Japanese Taekwondo team. He fought for the American Taekwondo team in the Olympics. He was on the board for many years. He may actually still be on the Olympic Taekwondo board. But he came through our school, and he was as serious as a heart attack. And he kind of, as he came through, ultimately what he was doing, he came through, he wanted to teach at some of the local schools, see if it was a good fit, but ultimately he thought he might end up closer to St. Louis, which is ultimately what he did. But he was with us for about 6-7 months, and he picked me. I don't know what it was, but he was like, he told me one day, he said, "We're going to work on some conditioning with you." And I had no idea what that meant. And he was like, "I want to make it so you're almost like bulletproof kind of thing." And I was like, "I still don't really understand." And he goes, "Tense your stomach, exhale on the shot." And he just goes, "Doop," on one little shot. And I'm like, because he knew how to hit, exactly where to hit. He didn't need to give you a lot of pressure. He goes, "We're going to change that." And so over the course of those 6-7 months that he was at the school, he conditioned me. And it's going to sound nuts to a lot of parents up there. But he would condition me with being hit to core, to body. I remember I was in a straddle. I was stretching on the floor one day, and the balls of my feet are up like this. And he comes walking around the corner with a shinai on his shoulder, bamboo stick. And looks at me, he goes, "Don't move." And he proceeds to take a golf-like stance and swings right into the balls of my feet. Boom, boom. And people around me, I know, they are freaking out. And he looks at me and he goes, "You good?" And I was like, "Yes, sir." Something I was doing was telling him that I could take it and that I would benefit from it. This is not a joy for him. This is him seeing something in me, which I deeply appreciate to this very day. And he got me into competition. And that's when I really saw what martial arts could really be on a broader scale. No matter how good the schools that you walk into, seeing the other worlds of it, it's so expansive. And so that got me into competing on the NASCA circuit and a couple of other things. And that was terrifying. Coming from a small town, I didn't like to speak in front of people. I was scared of my own shadow. And then they go, "You're going to walk into a ring in a room full of hundreds of people, and you're going to scream and you're going to yell and you're going to be judged for it." And but that was a very maturing time, because when I got into competition that was local and then moved up to the NASCA circuit, I was traveling on a plane to other cities at 14 years old by myself. And so that alone is something that you become more informed about who you are really quickly. And that's an invaluable experience that I had. The martial arts circuit was really I think if I hadn't done the martial arts circuit, I would have gone to college, which I did not do, which probably would have put me in a very standard kind of 9-to-5 kind of job. And I don't think I would have ever tried to push beyond any of what was the norm around me. And so all the credit in the world to Master Alberto Friedman. He absolutely changed my life for the best, in the best possible ways that could happen. It's great.
What style were you ultimately fighting? Was it Taekwondo?
Ultimately, I ended up there. My original martial arts school was more of an eclectic Kempo, a light Kempo base, but it was it covered arts of Kung Fu, Chinese style, Japanese style. We got into a bit of, because of my gymnastics background, we got into having more demos, and we had demo team. And so we introduced a little bit more of that acrobatics and tricking and stuff like that into the school. But I would have to say the thing, because I'm 90% leg, so Taekwondo was definitely the art that spoke to me, to put those to use and in the best ways and sneaky, playful ways. And yeah, Taekwondo is definitely at the top of the list for me.
I did, the very first one I did was WTF Taekwondo for a heartbeat. Then I did Shotokan for a few years. Then ITF, which is where I really kind of went about as high as I could competitively. did well in forms, and still we're talking up to red belt, so the forms weren't super acrobatic or anything. It was more just the standard stuff, and then fought as well. But then fast forward when I got into stunts, after being humbled by boxing and then Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu, and realizing that Taekwondo maybe wasn't the exact art for James Gearing himself to be the street fighter that I envisioned myself. But it served me so well when it got into the stunt world, when I was in, that area, because on screen, on stage, it was, amazing to watch. So when you reflect back now, how important was it for you to have found that kind of art versus maybe something gritty like Muay Thai or Jiu-Jitsu back then?
I think I've been very fortunate to be able to double a number of superheroes. And I think without getting attached to Taekwondo as much as I did and train it so hard, I don't know that opportunity would have been there because it was so informing to my movement. Taekwondo can be, you can disguise a lot of things, but it's very long. The idea is to cover that distance before that person knows you're even trying to. And so knowing how to make those long lines and create shapes, because ultimately the only difference, not only, but a major difference between superheroes fighting and your everyday people are the shapes that you're making. And that can translate very directly into your storytelling and things like that. So when you can make a really beautiful, sharp line out of a bunch of mayhem, it tells a different story. And so having that ability and that physical know-how of myself definitely opened doors for me. I will say some of my biggest habits I had to break. My first feature was called Bunraku, and I got to double Josh Hartnett. And they were like, he's going to be a tricking kicker. And I went in, that was for Clayton Barber and for Ronell Stovall. Got paid half scale, but it was my first job that I was going to be on the run of something. And so half scale was more money than I'd ever seen in my entire life. I was over the moon for that opportunity. And so I was thinking, hey, this is a bit of my wheelhouse. I think, I still have a lot to learn, but if they go, hey, throw a 540, hey, throw that, I'm okay there. And so I get attached to the project, and over the next 2 weeks, they go, actually, it's a bit more of a boxer. To wit, I said, huh? Because I'd never done any, I'd done some boxing, but it was not my wheelhouse. This was not my wheelhouse. I was still making chambers like this when I was doing choreography because it was so ingrained in me. And so over the course of the next 2 weeks, I dove hard into boxing, just tried to break as many of my old habits as I could and try to create some new ones as fast as I could. And ultimately, in the end, it worked out. But what that showed me was, even if you've got the one thing that gets you into the business, and that kind of used to be, in my opinion, the way you did it. My thing was actually bow staff. The thing that got me noticed was doing bow staff. It wasn't tricking. It wasn't fighting or anything like that. It was using a 6-foot stick. But that got me in the door. But then I realized very quickly that you never stop learning. If you want to continue to do this job, you have to continue to learn in a very active and hungry way. And so that was a very valuable lesson that I was fortunate to learn around a bunch of very schooled stunt people, Ralph Koch, Aaron Toney, Holland Diaz. We just had this amazing squad of people that knew what the rules were and how many of them we were kind of breaking on that show. But everyone kind of needs to go through that. You kind of need to see the far ends of each opportunity and each production to really know with confidence when you're walking into one, what type you're walking into. And so I got an absolute crash course in Romania for 7 months with a bunch of amazing guys. And yeah, that show is one of the ones that you go, you guys remember Bunraku? And everyone goes, I sure do. Lots of memories on that show.
It's funny when you talk about cutting the corners. It's probably the same. I worked in the pirate dinner show in Orlando and in
Yes,
California, and the same thing. Like when you work in Universal, everything is super, super. The oversight is to the point where if you do anything out of the boundaries, that you're going to be gone. Like Bolan Productions, the ones that taught us
yeah.
the weapon stuff, and even if you're holding a rubber gun, if you point that rubber gun to someone, you're done. Pirates Dinner Adventure, it was just a free for all. And for an hour and a half, you're doing stunts. You're fighting 30 feet up on a mast that's about 6 inches wide and just a circus loop. So
I've
if you
seen this
fall,
show.
so
Oh
but it
yeah,
was the same thing. It's where you go to learn. If you come out the other end without
yeah,
hurting yourself or dying, then it's a great training ground for other stunts.
yes. It's very informative because as much as I will tell anybody, follow whatever your passion is, whatever uh, the thing that you can do for 6 hours and not realize you've been doing it for 6 hours. Pursue that. There are certain things that not everyone are physically capable of because, like I said before, we are all completely different physically, in our mentality, in our backgrounds, and so I want everyone to pursue things to the fullest of their extent, but know that also stunt work. It's a hard job. It's a demanding job, and it comes with its own sets of challenges. It comes with some great bit of fulfillment at times, but this job is about sacrifice, and if you if you're willing to make those sacrifices and you so happen to be capable as well, then you fall in that narrow margin that can really do this job and stay in this career and do it for a long time. And a lot of that comes down to luck too. I count myself supremely lucky. There was a wonderful quote that I got from Master Herman Ocasio from my original martial arts school. He said, there are dozens of opportunities in every day for everybody. But if you have not prepared yourself for those opportunities, they are no longer opportunities. And so if you just continue to prepare yourself, working towards something, even if you don't know what that end mark is, I know it's going to be in this direction. And that's what I had ended up doing with around my college years. My mom came to me in junior year and she said, well, what are you going to, where do you want to go to college? And I said, I'm not sure. Because at the time it was just, well, that's the next step. That's what I have to do. I have to go to college. And I had two older sisters that went through college. Each of them, I think, did about 7 years of school. They ended up in medical fields and things. And so that's not a cheap thing, especially for, a family that had a little bit of a rough start. And so I gave it a lot of thought over the next 6 months. And I did a lot of research about, it's funny, more than 50% of people that go to school with a particular degree within the first year change that degree. And something like 40% change it the following year. And so it just got me thinking about where that money would be going, where it would come from, and ultimately, what would it play into what I'm going to do in the future? And I didn't know what I was going to do in the future, but I knew at that time it wasn't going to come from college. And so my mom, she took a big risk on me. I told her that, and she said, okay, but you have to do something. And I said, absolutely. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm going to do something. And she was on it. She made sure that I did it. And slowly but surely, the competition turned into doing live performance shows. I performed with a group called Sideswipe for a number of years, off and on. And that got me in California, which then turned into doing live shows there, making a little bit more money. And then ultimately that turned into, hey, do you have any martial arts friends that want to come in and do a previs? And so that directly correlated into me having the availability to find this thing that ultimately has become one of the greatest things in my life. I can't imagine not having stunts be a part of it. And so my mom just going against the grain, everybody around me, every kid, oh, I'm going here, I'm going there. This is my projection. This is what I'm doing. And many with full intention, and those things alter and those things change. And she looks at me and she's like, all you have is a question mark and you want me to trust that? But she did. She trusted me to follow through. And And yeah, it's led to one of the greatest things in my life.
Amazing. Yeah, my mum, I got to give her credit. Same exact thing. When I went to drama school, she was like, "Okay," and I went for a year. Realized I was an awful, awful actor, but I did all the stage combat stuff with the martial arts background, and that was okay. So if I don't say any lines and I just move, then I can exist in this space. And then the same thing
Yeah.
when I went to Fire Academy. She was the one that actually helped, and I was in my mid-20s by this point, but again, still believe. So I totally, totally relate to that. I want to get to your journey
Oh
into
yeah.
the stunt world, but just quickly, because I would imagine you probably had a similar experience that I did. I won national titles in martial arts in Taekwondo. And so, you're thinking, okay, well, I'm quite good at this fighting thing. And then you go to a boxing school and then you get murdered. And then you start getting the hang of the boxing thing. And then you go to a Muay Thai school and then you get your legs cut from under you. And you're like, okay. And then you start getting better at that. And then you go to jiu-jitsu school and then you get choked by, 13-year-old girls. And the constant humbling is amazing for the soul, but it really kind of debunks that shelf of medals and trophies that you had, when you were younger. So did you have
Yes.
a similar experience as you started exploring beyond the Taekwondo world?
1,000%. You know, I did a lot of tournaments across a number of different circuits, but they, I think there's a little bit of an approach to some of the competitions that I was a part, because it was from the moment you can throw a kick to this is nearer your last kick than your first kind of age range. Everyone in between, and so um, I think there was a little bit of a youth to the approach to a lot of that, and especially obviously adding musical forms, musical weapons, and different things like that. Um, but yeah, you kind of fall into a little bit of a. I feel pretty good because at the end of this tournament, I won, and they gave me a 6-foot trophy. Wow! And you bring that one home, and then sure enough, I absolutely had that experience when I went from my original martial arts school, and I ended up down in Georgia and training with a group called Kick Team, and they were predominantly Taekwondo. And I was like, oh, I don't know martial arts at all. I, this is completely different. And ultimately, it wasn't completely different, but the challenge in my mind was very different. And so then, after going through that, meeting other martial artists within the stunt world that came from completely different backgrounds, absolutely had that same experience. Who was it? Kofi Alum. I saw him doing capoeira online many years ago, and then I met him in person, and I was like, holy cow. And he started showing me a little bit of the flow and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, wow, this is not what I thought it was at all. I need to learn. And luckily it made me excited to learn. I'm very glad looking back that it did not defeat me. It made me more hungry to learn because I just wanted to learn that cool thing. And that kind of translated even into skills within the stunt world as things continued as well. All of a sudden, I'm on a wire. If you don't do stunts, how often are you ever clipped into a harness, outside of a, vacation zip line or something? It's so rare to do that. And so, I always think of, as soon as you think you're a master, you've just started. And when you are fully convinced that you have no business doing the thing you're doing, you're closer to being a master than you ever have been. Because I feel like being a master of something ultimately is not just the skills and the time, but it's a mindset of continuing to learn and expand on that thing. Because you can get all the way to the end of that book, and if you went back and started over again, you're going to learn something else. And so I feel like it's a bit more of a mindset. But yeah, I would have to say to anybody that studies one style, walk into another school, walk into a boxing school where they're. And someone had said this to me early on as well, like in martial arts, especially like think in jiu-jitsu, the number of tools that you need to have in your kit to participate in Brazilian jiu-jitsu as opposed to in boxing. And I'm not saying boxing is easier. I'm saying its focus is smaller. So these bits of skill here become so much sharper, so much more second nature. Um, and yeah, I definitely got teed up the first time I went into a box, feeling good. I'm like, okay, you're come, and just getting absolutely mauled. It's good for the soul, though. It's good for the soul.
It is, absolutely. Well, I want to get to the journey in when, like I said, I went to drama school. We did the what they call it, the showcase at the end. I think it was in like 4 different cities in the UK.
Yeah.
And I did a monologue, and knowing again, until you wanted to stand out, I did like it worked in the monologue, but I did like a spinning hook kick at the end just to kind of be like, okay, this is a slightly different actor that we're talking about, because obviously my acting wasn't good enough. So let me show them something else. But I actually had someone from William Morris approach me, one of only 2 agents at the end, and say, I really like what I saw, but you wouldn't be in the group that I oversee. So let me know when you get something else, and I'll send the right agent to come watch. Amazing. Walk out buzzing until I realized that you need an agent to get work, and you need work to get an agent. And I was stuck in that revolving door. And again, adding the fact that I got a face like a smacked ass and I can't act. So which led me ultimately like a bizarre trip, and I ended up working in live stunt shows in Japan, Universal. So that was kind of my on ramp. But then I joined the fire service, so I never did the TV film hustling side. But as I started working with some of my other stuntmen, like Steve Dunleavy that we were talking about yesterday, for example, I started hearing about how hard it was to get into it, and how you're sneaking onto the set and hustling and trying to give your your headshot. So you obviously have this background where you're already kind of on a spotlight and you're being invited, as you said, to a previs. Walk me through your journey into that world. Did you have the same kind of barriers, or did that particular element that you brought in help you actually transition into the world of stunts?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. So that previs. So one day, like I said, I had been living in California and I was doing live shows and things like that. But at one point, I went broke, as many of us do, and so I ended up back in Boston for a short time. I picked up a job there. I worked for a company that fixed betting machines at horse and dog tracks. I would set up the satellite connections, and so people could do bets all over the world and stuff like that. And that get into that how motivating that was to get out of. But so while I was home and I was doing that job, I got a call to go out to LA and do a live show, and so I went out. And during that time while I was there, Matt Mullins, shout out to Matt Mullins, he reached out and he was going to play the lead of this previs that was the intro to a video game that's many layers deep, but essentially what the beginning was going to look like. He was going to play the guy in the middle. And the stunt coordinator had reached out to him and he said, hey, do you have any martial arts buddies that would want to come in and play? And he goes, funny enough, I do. I have 3 buddies here right now. And so it was Matt had brought in myself, Chris Brewster, and Jackson Spidell. And that was all 3 of our very first days of stunts. And it just so happened to be for JJ Perry, who, as many of you know, is now a big director. And so, and JJ, beast, one of the greatest to ever do the job. I heard stories about JJ years before I even knew stunts was a thing, which is kind of weird. But yeah, and so I went in and Matt's playing the guy in the middle and we're all just playing these long lines opposing to him. So camera starts on Matt and pulls back and we start to pull in and fold in and he takes us out as he's working his way down as camera pulls him. And I'm the first guy. And so camera pulls back and I go to throw a punch and he blocks it and he hits me and I fall to the ground. And then I just need to be unconscious for the rest of the shot as camera moves away. And my face is away from camera. And I remember I take the shot and I hit the ground and I'm looking at this dingy gray carpet. It was in an old Muay Thai school. And so I'm just staring at this carpet. And I remember thinking to myself, this is the thing. I wasn't sure what I was going to pursue. I didn't know where it was going to line up. But this moment right now, this is the thing. I just found it. And I remember getting so excited. Like I was like vibrating that day. And so we finished that day. We got to the end of the day and JJ was like, hey, thanks for coming in, guys. I got a couple shirts and hats if you want them, just And I still have that Stunts Unlimited shirt to this day. It is back at home in a pristine little box, because that was the day that absolutely changed my life. And so I got home that day. I called my boss back in Massachusetts and I said, "Hey, I'm giving you my 30 days notice." And he went, "What? What?" And I go, "I'll tell you when I get home." And so I went home and I went to work on my very last day. And I know he did not mean it the way that I received it, but I used it as a great bit of motivation. I was in my very last day. My boss came and said, "So you're going to go out and you're going to be a stuntman?" And I said, "I'm going to try." And I said, "All right, well, when you come back, there'll be a job waiting for you." And I know he didn't mean that to be, "Hey, you're going to fail." But that's what my brain heard, especially as an angsty little, 19, 20-year-old kid. And that sat with me. And I wasn't angry about it, but I just thought to myself, I'm sure that's not the only person that thinks that. Because this is a crazy thing I'm doing. I'm just going to abandon this job. So many people that do the job I was doing make it a career because it's good money, it's low stress. They just do it until they're done. And so a number of the people I worked with were looking at me like, "What are you doing? Why would you ever take such a risk like that?" And I didn't have an answer for him other than my own excitement. I had a belief in the back of my mind, you can do more. There is something bigger you could be doing. Don't shortchange yourself. Don't go to that track for another 12-hour shift and fix betting machines. Get yourself somewhere else. And so exactly to the day, I moved right back out to California, started training, did a lot of free viz. But ultimately those were a huge bit of education. And that's where I met for the first time. The first working stunt person I met was Aaron Toney. And if you know anything about the Marvel Universe, about any American Chinese style shot films, Aaron is involved in it. I learned a lot from him, even just from watching him work on wires. And so that was just one of those random things when I made that leap and I showed up in LA with some bags of clothes in my car. I slept on couches. I slept in my car. I would go to any open gyms that I could because that's where all my money went, was trying to cover open gyms and food. It's one of those things that when you look back now, I mean, if I don't have kids, but if I had kids and one of them looked at me and said, "Hey, you know that thing you did? I'm going to go do that." I'd be like, "No." Grab them by the shoulders. Don't you, because it's a wild thought, but ultimately those bold swings are the things that get you the home runs. And you don't know what's going to happen, but you have to swing. There's no point in just standing there. You got to swing. And so, I count myself supremely lucky in a lot of ways for that. So many good experiences. I met some wonderful people.
Do you put that self-belief again down to your mother? Because when I look back now, this wasn't the case with my dad. My dad was, say you got, 6 A's and a B, he'd be like, "Why'd you get a B?" But my mum was very much like, you can do anything, and not in a delusional way, not in, you could be in the NBA, James. That wasn't going to happen, obviously. But just why not? Why not you? Don't be a sheep. Just go out there and if it's something that you're passionate about, just chase it. Don't worry about if you fail, because you're not going to know until you try. When you reflect back now, you think that was the voice in your head?
1,000%. There's and I don't mean to take anything away from my father. My father worked very hard for us to make sure that there was money coming in, that there was food on the table. But he was ultimately doing that work a lot of times outside of the house at work. And my mom, even holding multiple jobs, she was the face you saw the most. And so you saw her doing the constant problem solving, fighting for the smallest thing, because that small thing is the difference every month. And I know that she did all that so that my sisters and I could do anything, that we could try to do anything. And the only thing in our way would be us. The only thing that would stop us was our own misstep, our own lack of motivation, hubris, whatever it would be. She set us up in a way that she might not have been able to give us some loan to start a business. She might not have been able to provide this or that, but she instilled in us, if you want something, not only will someone not give it to you, they're going to try to keep it from you. So if you want it, go get it, because no one else is going to do it for you. And it's and in not a bleak way, in a that's the way of the world way. Your struggles are not unique. Nobody's struggles are particularly unique, because we have all dealt with something, and someone inevitably has it worse, has less, and is trying to do more than you. What's your excuse? Kind of thing. And I refer back to that in so many walks of life, so many different facets and of things that you deal with in your everyday, not even just career. It's easy to be angry about it, and I'm sure I have displayed frustration in situations where it's like, hey, that's just the way of the world. But knowing that that's how it is, if you want it, go get it. It's not, it doesn't have to be, you're the lead character, you're the hero facing all the things. No, if you want it, it's matter of fact. It's ones and zeros. To get to there, you have to take this many steps. When do you want to start stepping?
There are a lot of people that want to enter the stunt profession. Obviously, a lot of people I did the live shows with, that was their ultimate goal, to get into film and television. But a lot of people just don't make it. What was it about, again, your mindset, your persistence that allowed you to get to this level of success that you have now?
I think ultimately, because I am not more capable than another stunt performer. I don't come from a lineage, as it were, and so there weren't a lot of legs up. But I think the difference ultimately is what you're willing to sacrifice. And I don't mean to make that a daunting kind of phrase, but ultimately, to master something takes time. To make something second nature, to automatically approach a situation with an open mind and be in a problem-solving way, it takes time. And it's kind of one of the only things that we get to trade, really, right, is our time. And so if you're willing to trade enough time and use it wisely, you can get in and you can stay in. Now, I think there is a delicate balance. Later in my career now, I've been doing it for 20 years or so. What I value is family, being able to get back to that family, being able to, as I say, participate in life, because ultimately one of the things that allowed me to do that was participating a little less in life. And I became very obsessed with work. And I'm not saying that this is the way that you have to go about it, but if I had any regrets, it would be some family events and gatherings that I missed because I focused on the work. And my family understands. They knew that what I was trying to pursue, I was trying to bite off a big thing, and certainly not anything that I think anyone in our immediate area was really on their radar to do. But ultimately, it comes down to adapting and what you're willing to sacrifice. You shouldn't ever feel like you have to sacrifice everything. If you have to sacrifice everything, you're either pursuing with the wrong people or the wrong thing. But it certainly is something that is going to shape you. I think everyone that works consistently, and not even just in stunts, in any member of a crew in any department, you just live a little differently. Your mentality has to be a little different in your approach to everything. And if you're truly passionate about the work, ultimately, I think what I've discovered is that this, and again, not just stunts, just working in film, working in TV, you have to problem solve. If the idea of having to quickly solve a problem on the fly is something that is nerve-wracking or frustrating or something that you don't feel you're good at, that is a major thing that would keep you out of this business. Because, you see, and I love to see people's new reels. Our younger generation, they throw some amazing reels together, these massive moves, out on gymnastics floor, throwing triple falls and quad backs. And it's amazing to see. But that's you in t-shirt and shorts on a gymnastics floor after you've done 30 reps of it, and you're with your friends and you're relaxed. Now, when that coordinator calls and says, "Can you do that trick full?" and you say yes, you need to know that he means in boots, a trench coat on concrete, and 50 times. And so that, I think, is a huge mentality shift as far as what you say you're capable of. You need to be able to do that upside down, backwards, blindfolded, without oxygen, and then some. And so that's a big thing. You have to approach things as much as, hey, I can do that for you. You have to come into that with some realistic, humble energy, and know that that chances are when you go, oh yeah, I can do that in my sleep, they might ask you to do it in your sleep.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I was just thinking of the parallel in the fire service. We go to the fire academy 9 to 5, we'll do drills and then we'll stop for lunch and then we'll go and do it again. And don't get me wrong, it's grueling in fire academy, but
I'm sure
what we don't realize until we actually do the job is, you might have to fight fire, but that might be, 45 hours into a 48-hour shift where you haven't slept for 2 days. And now climbing that ladder is a completely different challenge, because you're, 80 feet in the air and you can barely even see straight because you're so tired. So it's very, very similar to what you're talking about in my profession as well. That problem solving, you get called to, a car fire, and it's like, it is a car fire, and there's 4 more of them on fire, and they're in a garage under a wooden apartment complex. So now you're having to completely change the way you think, with the sleep deprivation and everything else. So it does match that. And it's interesting you said about the 50 times, because I just had Jason Gray on the show, who was the guy that taught me years ago in Japan. And he was making the comparison between the stunt show world and the film and television world. And he said, the reason that even they choreograph the way that we did in T2 and the Bourne show was you have to be able to do that, 10, 12 times a day, for years. So you can't beat someone into the ground. They just wouldn't, they'd run out of stunt performance. Versus, with you guys, like you said, you've got to have that the resilience, but you're not going to do that same exact move, for 12 months straight. So it was an interesting thing seeing the comparison as far as the choreography, that on the film you can be more extreme because you're not having to do it day in, day out like they would in Universal Studios.
Yeah. Well, and there's only been, I'll say there's been a couple of exceptions, but one major exception to that kind of being able to prepare, know kind of what those extra factors are, go in and know, okay, I'm probably going to have to do this 6-7 times. Compared to, and I guess the exception I should say would be working for the amazing David Fincher, who is known for doing a minimum of about 40 takes, even for inserts. And that's why David Fincher's films are what they are, because he is precision in motion. And so so we did The Killer, myself, Dave McCumber, Sala Baker, and we did the fight in the house with the Brute, and Sala played the Brute. And Sala played Sauron. That was one of his first gigs in Lord of the Rings. So Sala is a big, very strong man, but he is a wonderful dance partner. I thank Dave so much. Dave and David for casting him, but Dave for also getting Sala into that ring to audition for it, because there's a handful of people I think that I would have been able to complete that fight with safely. And even with Sala, as good as he is, and I think as wonderful as Dave McCumber is in trying to find ways to keep us protected, we still banged each other up pretty good. I had a little trip to the hospital. Sala had a little knockout. We did a lot of stuff to each other. And so that being factored in with David Fincher, who we planned ahead that every gag going through these sets of doors, being slammed onto that ground, crashing through that thing, being power bombed onto that table, be prepared to do that 40 times at full performance. And that is the first time I experienced it. something like that. I remember we finished that fight. I think we shot it over 9 days, 11 days, more days than we initially had planned. And I turned to Sala and I looked at him, put my hand on his shoulder. He put his hand on mine. And we looked at each other and we are like, love you, bud. He goes, love you, man. And I go, I haven't had my ass kicked like that in a long time. Because we had to go for it. That was one of those just brutal fights. And with the lighting and things like that, Michael Fassbender, he learned the entire fight very quickly. What a phenomenal brain on Michael Fassbender. I was very impressed with him in his movement and his ability to just, he'd watch us do something. He'd watch 50 beats choreography and go, okay, and right around beat 37, you did, and I'm like, wow, you just soaked all of that in. Amazing. But he was also very, Michael was wonderful in the sense that he'd be like, if I'm watching Justin do this and I like it far more than the way I would do it, why wouldn't we just have Justin do it? And so that was a huge gift for Sal and I to kind of just stay in the zone on those long days, doing those long takes. And so we got to do a lot of that fight ourselves. But there's one particular, so two moments in that fight. We're in the hall. I kick Sal in the leg and he drops down to a knee and I go to round kick him. And so we're on take 30 something and camera's in here. And so when I kick, this is Salah's head. I need to get my foot behind Salah's head so the camera back here can see it. And so I need to get within inches, probably within 2 inches. And so we go and I'm just a little bit over and he's just a little bit over and Salah goes,
so realistic.
Oh yes. And it was really quick. And he got up and he was like, I just went up for a second, didn't I? I go, yeah, but how do you feel? And he goes, I feel okay. So we take our appropriate time. We make sure he's good. And, we start moving through more of the fight and it's just hammer this and hammer that. We get to a spot where Salah he double underhooks underneath me, lifts me up and drives me down through a glass table. And it was our last shot on a Friday because inevitably when you're working with glass, you are always going to get cut, as I'm sure you know. And so we saved it for the very end. We went through tables with no glass and went, okay, let's put the glass in. And this was one of the only shots that we didn't do more than, I think we did 8 without glass. And then we put glass in and did it. And that was the least number of takes we could do it with. And so we hit the poppers. And so Salah's costume, he's in shorts and a tank top. And so knees, elbows, and everything are exposed. And so our plan is, Salah, you're going to put your weight into me and you're going to toe up. So you're not putting your knees or your elbows into this glass and cutting yourself. And so when he comes in, I'm taking most of his weight right here. Boom! And we hit and I go, and immediately I'm thinking 2 things. I either cracked my ribs or I have severely bruised my ribs and I can't decipher in that moment. And so this is where I saw David Fincher's wife, Sian, do the absolute sweetest thing. I'm kind of struggling to breathe, but I get upright and I'm sitting in the chair trying to get some breath. And I look over and Sian is standing at the end of the table. Such a sweet woman. And she's tearing up. She's crying. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And she's talking to Dave McCumber, our stunt coordinator. She goes, is he going to be okay? I can't believe this happened. And I have never seen a producer anywhere near emotional over something like that. And not to say that, all producers are emotionless people, but there are other factors involved. And to have such a human moment there just spoke volumes to me. And it's another reason that anytime David Fincher or Sian make my phone ring or Dave McCumber, I will be there. But it was a phenomenal experience to go from your typical, okay, oh man, yeah, we had to do 20 of those to we did 40 of everything. It's very different, but it's a true test. It's a true test.
So you're going to have to educate me because I'm completely naive. I always thought when we saw glass, and a stunt person going through it, that was a version of sugar glass. That isn't the case then?
So there's a couple of different ways that you can go through glass. A lot of times with smaller paints, you can use candy glass, which is ostensibly just kind of compressed, it can still break into sharper corners. So you still need to be careful with it, but it is very brittle. You can turn candy glass into powder really quickly. When they're bigger panes, because the sugar, the candy glass isn't as resilient. When you start to expand it, make it bigger, make it heavier, it won't hold its shape, and it can break with you just touching it, or with temperature change, it'll just shatter. And so sometimes you have to go to real glass or tempered glass, and then you will go to a button system a lot of times where they'll put a little popper somewhere key the moment before you've hit that glass, because a solid pane of glass. I remember the first time I saw it, a guy had to put his head into a car window, and they didn't want to use candy because you couldn't see through it appropriately. You could tell that it wasn't real, and so they had a effects guy right here. And so as soon as his head got right here, he'd go boom, and it would start the crack, and then his head would continue and break the rest of it. But if that button pushes off, that guy's unconscious. He just headbutt, a windshield. And so that timing has to be really specific. So there's a couple of ways to do glass. Like when we were doing Fall Guy, in the bathroom, I get kicked and I go back through massive pane of glass. That glass, there was so much glass and it was so heavy. I went through it, and the amount of weight that was coming into my chest and my legs actually stopped me. And so I was flying back, and as the glass hit, it like anchored my feet, and I just teetered and stopped to the ground. It was so heavy. And you're always surprised at how much glass there is when you do one like that. And so this is something that Ryan Gosling actually put in the movie, because he saw it happen to me. We go through the glass, and I stand up, and like I said, no matter what, when you're going through glass, you're going to get cut. And so I've got some cuts around here, a little bit on my neck and stuff like that. So we go over to the medic, and he's removing, just making sure there's nothing in the eyes and stuff. But I have a bunch of glass just trapped in my hood and in my clothes. And so I'm standing there as the medic is going through over here, and I'm just like, I'm shaking all this glass out of my hood, and it just keeps coming out. And I'm like, geez, there's so much of it. And sure enough, Ryan's standing there, and he goes, can we put a bunch of glass in my hood? And it's in the movie. He's standing there having a conversation with the other actors, and he's shaking glass up because he was like, I couldn't believe how much glass came out of your hood. We have to put that in, right? And so that was a little real life thing that he ended up adding in from our glass time on that.
Talk to me about the Fall Guy. When I was a little boy, I watched the original TV show. That's how old I am. And when I was young, that's what I wanted. I wanted to be a firefighter. Yep, firefighter, or a stuntman, or a doctor. And ironically, I became all three in versions of, which is bizarre for a little English farm boy to end up here doing stunts. But when you guys made that film, like my wife said that she was watching me watch the film, and I was just like a kid in the candy store, because not only that, I'd been a tourist in Universal Studios Florida when the Miami Vice stunt show was still going, and I ended up working with Jason and Kyle. And Kyle was one of the people that would do the boat jump. So most people are watching this really cool action film. I'm reliving my childhood and some of my stunt journey, and it was absolutely incredible. So you've been doing stunts for a while. Talk to me about this being put in front of you, and what was your experience as a stunt person doing what arguably one of the greatest nods to your profession?
Where to begin? So I had heard that film was going to be a thing, but I wasn't sure who had picked it up. And then I found, it's 8711 or 87 North, excuse me. And I had a little bit of history with David Leitch, but not much, and certainly not enough to reach out, and be like, hey, give me a job. Me and every other stunt person on the planet would like to be on this movie, but me. So I absolutely was not going to do that. And so I just I reached out to a few people that might have some sort of information somewhere more appropriate and professional that I might be able to just throw my hat in the ring. Because that's ultimately if I could get that amount of a shot, that was more than I could ever ask for. And so what ended up happening, a friend actually reached out and he said, hey, what are you doing around this time? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, right now I think that's pretty open. What's going on? He goes, well, I can't tell you exactly what's going on, but if I'd like to submit your name for something. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Turns out that it was Fall Guy, and he had submitted me to the fight coordinator. And so fight coordinator reached out. We had never met in person, never spoken. He reached out and he goes, "Hey, I've seen your reel, and I've spoken to a number of people that I trust, and they seem to trust you." And I go, I said, "Then the checks have been clearing." And so he goes, "Well, I'd like to hire you for this. We'll move forward. We'll proceed as we can, and as information comes forward, I'll let you know." Blah blah blah. And so, sure enough, he calls back. He goes, "Yep, you got it. You're going to be a double for Ryan Gosling on The Fall Guy." And I remember welling up after I got off the phone, because it meant so many things to me, as I know that it would mean so much to anybody that got that opportunity, anyone that takes this job seriously and knows any history about where this profession comes from. The Fall Guy. I went back and I studied that original TV show. I can only describe it as being, it itself is just classic in every sense of the 80s action, and finding some obscene reason that you needed to ride a dirt bike, on a railing in order to prove that you can be a part of the motorcycle gang, and jump a lake with a car, to get a better angle on something. And it's just, watching that is just, it's something that can never be recreated. And to now know, like, I'm a part of not only like a modern adaptation of it, but an 87 North adaptation of it, because I have so much respect for what they do over there, David and his whole team, because they take things that are very easily screwed up, honestly, and they go, "What about that?" And you go, "Oh, that's super creative. That's so fun." And so nobody really knew exactly what the movie was going to be, as far as specifically really like genre. We had no idea that it was going to turn into kind of rom-com action. I don't think anyone really knew that up front. And so, long story short, I end up getting that call, and I'm super excited. I get to the airport, and I'm sitting down at the gate, and Ben Jenkins comes walking up towards me. I go, "Hey, bud." I hadn't seen him in years. And I say hello, and I go, "You going to Australia?" And he goes, "Yeah." I go, "You doubling Ryan?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Sick, me too." So we didn't realize that was the thing until we were literally getting on the plane. But Ben is such as I'm sure you know, he's such a sweet, wonderfully talented. He and I bonded very quickly when we had first met. And so coming into this job, we came in with no ego. We don't know who's going to be responsible for what. We just want to make sure that we are contributing to this project, and we're making it the best that we possibly can. And those were our rules. We're going to have an open dialogue about whatever is coming, because we don't know. And we're just going to hunker down, and we're going to crush this thing. We're going to do the best we can. And so we got out there, and I met Chris O'Hara for the first time in person as well. And technically, he is my boss, and I'd never met him. But Chris was wonderful. Just a welcoming spirit. He knew what he was getting himself into, in the sense that nobody was fully sure, and to be prepared for everything. And Chris is a master of management. He really, there was a lot of really big things thrown on his plate with a very short, truncated timetable, and he executed every time. Him, Keir Beck, just massive shout out to that entire team for anytime something came up, the whole squad was on it. Sometimes you get into a habit of being like, "Oh, the rigging team, the fight team." He said first thing out the gate, he was like, "There is no rigging team. There is no fight team. This is the stunt team. And when something has to be accomplished, we're all going to do it." And that was the only way we could. There was no staying in your lane, as it were. We needed all hands on deck. Doing things on the Sydney Harbour Bridge, to shutting down the Sydney Opera House, shooting out on Bondi Beach, Logan getting set to break world records, doing cannon rolls down a beach, showing the homage to the original cannon roll. Logan did so much in that show. Troy, classic. backwards high fall, 2.5 out or something like that, out of a helicopter buck on a windy day, first thing, and nailing it. But all of that, none of that would have gone the way it was supposed to without Chris. The one of the most, if not the most competent coordinators for these kind of massive big shows like this, true, like through and through stunt shows. Chris just absolutely dominated it. And I think he put a wonderful team of people together to do that. But I am, it's indescribable ultimately what that means, because I don't think it's fully set in even now. I don't think that it's going to be for many years. And someone goes, "Oh, that Fall Guy movie," that it might really kind of sink in. I got to be a stunt double for the guy playing the stunt double, for a director that used to be a stunt double. And then I got to play the character of the stunt double that kind of kicks off all of this madness. It doesn't get more meta than that. And I count myself supremely grateful, so grateful for those opportunities. Because again, fight coordinator and Chris, they'd never met me. They never met me, and they on trust hired me for major spots, for being responsible for Aaron Taylor Johnson, sharing responsibilities with others, but being responsible for Ryan Gosling as well, and their safety and the look of the film. And we're all just very grateful that David Leitch is such a collaborative person. It in no way, shape, or form felt like it was his way or the highway. He wanted everyone to just, he'd go, "This is your idea," and he'd go, "What if we went a little further? Okay, what if we went a little further this way?" And just kind of brought the best out of so many of us. It's an indescribable feeling to have been able to be a part of that project. And I can never say thank you enough for it, really.
How did they end up partitioning the doubling? Obviously, Logan was doing the driving. I mean, that, as you said, that's
Right.
his area of specialty. I know Ben obviously did a lot of the parkour and tricking. He talked about doing the ratchet, fire burn, and then the car hit. Yeah. So how did you guys, end up ultimately figuring out who's doing which as far as the two of you?
Well, and again, I refer back to Ben and I just having a very open dialogue. Chris was wonderful. I remember one of the first days that we actually got settled into our space. It was just me, Ben, and our fight coordinator. And he goes, "All right, I need you guys to start working on the bin fight, which is the skip bin fight, or their trash truck fight." And fight coordinator goes, "Hey, I haven't worked as much with you guys, so why don't you guys just go and make something, see what comes out." And Ben and I got really excited because we're like, I know we create well together. We vibe really well. And so in like 20 minutes, we had a version of that fight, and Chris O'Hara came down and he watched what we made, and he went, "Oh, I like that. If the scene stays the way it is, let's finalize that. But I like that." And so that's a huge, like, day one, huge win. 20 minutes later, and of course the scene did not stay that way, and it changed multiple times, and it turned into all these different things. But it was a nice way to kind of set the bar there, where, hey, Ben and I are good. There's no egos here. So whatever you decide for people to do, we're so cool with it. We're so fine, because ultimately, and that comes down to Ben and I both wanting to see the other one succeed. We want to give the other person a spotlight, and that's so important when you have multiple doubles for the same character. If you've got a single ego in that room, it can get really hard. And so Ben and I were just very open and honest as we started to solidify what the things would be. We started talking amongst ourselves and just like, "Hey, what's one that you really want to do?" He goes, "I really want to do that car hit." And I go, "Done." I was like, "I would really like to do the club fight when he's on truck." And he goes, 100%. So, and I was like, "Well, you're obviously going to do the parkour chase scene, and anything attached to that chase, you should do." And he goes, "Yeah." Well, because that's his, I am not a parkour stylist. I can fake it. Ben's legit. Ben is so legit. And I would never in a million years try to take any of that away from him. And again, we just had such a wonderful open dialogue. And so we had kind of discussed amongst ourselves, like, hey, this is what I like to do. If you want to try to do that. So then we go to Chris and we go, hey, we were just curious, have you kind of made some of these decisions? And I think he was messing with us. But he goes, well, we'll see which one of you looks the most like him on the day, and that's will do it. And we both kind of looked at each other and were like, what? But I think even Chris in that time, he knew that the schedule of the show was going to be so intense that he was going to need both of us to be able to do whatever he needed on that night, depending on what the demands were. And so it panned out that Ben did a lot of the stunt work for Ryan, outside of car and high fall. In our prep, we were prepared to do as much as we could. The plan was I would do all fights and a lot of the wire work. He would do the chases. He would do the ratchet, car hit, stuff like that. Originally, we were talking about sharing the ratchet fire between Ben and I, because he's like, if they want to do 8 of these because I think we ended up doing 8. But he's like, if they want to do 8 of those in a day, what if they dressed us both? You run in, do one, zoop, boom. Team is prepping you. I run in, do one, zoop, boom, and we just keep rotating, and we can get it done. But ultimately, Chris decided, he was like, I want that to be one person. I just want it to be the same person for all of them. I don't want to have to factor in different gels and things like that. And I go, totally understand. It's his call anyway. It doesn't matter what I think. So yeah, Ben did such a banger job on that show. He was prepared to do absolutely everything, and they threw a lot at him, especially one of my favorite shots, and you see it in every trailer. The Hummer slides to a 90, and Ryan's character goes flying off towards the helicopter, and he grabs the skiff. Ben did such a sick job on that gag, and I filmed little like precursors, like a ride up and stuff like that. But that's Ben all day. That's Ben, and it's in every trailer, and I love that. There's actually a bunch of shots in this movie. If you freeze frame it, it's Ben's face. You can see it flat out, which I think is great. But yeah, I ended up doing a number of the apartment fight and the club fight and the fight in front of Sydney Opera House, which was I was so excited by, because there's only been one other time. My understanding is there's only one other time that the Sydney Opera House is shut down in this capacity for a film. And it was for Jackie Chan in 2017. And so us going back and being the only other people to go do that. And the nature of that fight, a sword wielding cowboy space ranger, it's rare you get a shot like that, right? But yeah, there was just such a massive mutual respect amongst everyone on that show. It just made everything so much easier, because that schedule, is what it is, and you can't really change that. But we just had such a wonderful team, and we were all trying to just be as communicative as possible. Massive shout out to Ben, to Josh Freed. Josh Freed was a major player in that. Micah Moore, we did a lot of different versions of previs, and we had a lot of people shooting them because somebody would be busy over there, somebody would be busy over there. So we had a lot of people coming through with their gear and their equipment. A lot of people editing. I think I have a photo on my phone where there's 12 of us all around a table, and we're all editing. No one's up and fighting. No one's in the gym lifting. We had just shot like 3 fights, and everyone is like this, just trying to finish the edit to get something in. And that's what it took to get that show done, was just a team collaboration. And so it became apparent anytime that we moved away from that, where there was a hitch in the giddy up, as it were, it needed to be sussed out so that we could continue to move forward. And that's what we did.
I think what was really powerful was when I watched the docuseries that you did, the behind the scenes, and with it happening during COVID. And, what really struck me actually was David, especially Chris O'Hara, being very vulnerable about the guilt that they felt from being away from their family, and, the strain that it does take, as you mentioned earlier. Now, I know that your wife is also in the same, stunt industry. So talk to me about that. Not just the Fall Guy, but in general, how are you able to maintain a healthy relationship when your schedule does pull you from your family for weeks, sometimes months at a time?
It is certainly a challenge. My wife, Cece Ice, She's way more badass than I'll ever be. Um, we met actually doing the pilot of the TV series of Watchmen. Um, Playing a bad guy, shooting a 50 cal out of the back of a pickup truck, and she was taking shelter, as you do, behind a cow. But we we met on that show, and we were friends. We were just kind of, I think we were both found ourselves in a particular point in life that we filled a needed support system very much for one another. And on top of the fact that she's just a wonderful soul. And so we went in to do reshoots of Endgame, of Avengers Endgame. And she and I were the only ones that actually brought meal prep every day. We brought our own food. And so we'd get to lunch during our prep days and they go, all right, cool. That's an hour off campus. And she and I would go grab our food. And so I got a few months of free lunch dates with this wonderful person. And just trying to get to know her and her to know me. And ultimately we kind of, like I said, we became a little bit of a support system for what we were going through in our lives at that time, very early on. And so fast forward a few years, we were just getting towards the pandemic and COVID. I am working on Falcon Winter Soldier, doubling Wyatt Russell, and she's working on WandaVision, doubling Elizabeth Olsen. And so she's got a little bit of a gap. And so our show goes to Prague. And I go, why don't you come out to Prague? When's another time we're going to have the opportunity to do this? And so she comes out to Prague. And we're working on the show. We're there for a couple of days. And we get an email one night, like 10 p.m. And it's Shane Everstone. He says, hey, be prepared to be out of country within the next 6 hours. They're closing the U.S. borders. Uh-oh. So they're actively figuring out how to get us out, but Cece is here on our own dime. And so we have to figure out how to get her out of the country. And I was like, I'm not leaving until I know she's out. And so, we scrambled and she found this flight. We were able to get her on a plane and got us out. And we ended up back in Georgia during our pandemic lockdown. And Cece owns a rehearsal training space called Apex, which is wonderful, 5,000 square foot warehouse space. She's got almost 200 feet of truss in the ceiling and a gym and workout and spring floor. But it's a lot to manage. It's also quite a price tag. And so then all of a sudden everything shut down. So we have a place to train, but we have no money coming outside of what we hope will be residual income. And so we found ourselves very hunkered down and kind of facing different problems than you would, in a standard kind of typical day and in this relationship. And by the end of the pandemic lockdown, we were engaged. It was one of those things where you just, it's not funny, but it is, once your relationship gets put in a pressure cooker, you figure out, is it worth it? Are we right? What are the things? And we discovered in those 6-7 months, we were like, you're it. And so it was really important to have that certainty. Everything is forever changing. We're always growing, but that certainty out the gate was like, we know that we're going to face a lot in our careers and in our lives, and having that confirmation right there up front. Hey, I can't say that I need to go be somewhere. We have to deal with what's going on right now because the world is locked down. That was a really big gift for us. And so we got engaged. I went to Prague for 2 months. She went to California. We got back. We purchased a home. She saw it for 3 days and then disappeared for 4 months. And there was no real visiting one another because it was pandemic and COVID times. And so to go visit someone meant a month of your life just in quarantining, let alone actually getting to see them. And so so we did that, and then she came back. We got married in the backyard, and then she left for 6 months. And that was, it's funny and sad, but the first 3 years or so of our marriage, we spent across 3 years, we probably spent a combined total of 5 months together, actually in person. And that's one of those things that I was mentioning earlier about sacrifice. It can be a gift and a curse to have your partner be in this business with you. because they get it. That is a massive thing that some people don't really understand, is that just looking at your partner and not being able to tell them when you have to go to work, how long you'll be there, what you're going to do when you're there, you know, having no certainty of, oh, well, how much money you're going to make, you know, that week, you know, what do you, I don't know. That can be a really big trip for a lot of people. And that is certainly a reason that a number of relationships in the past didn't work, is because unless you're in it, you really don't get it. And so it's wonderful to have that. Oh, you understand that's great, but you are also susceptible to the same schedule. And so that is the other side of that coin, unfortunately. And so we have gotten really good at distance, which we are both happy and sad about. We have a number of things and practices that we do to help us stay connected. You know, one small thing, and I would give this out as a piece of advice actually to anyone. And I've said this to other stunt people, to crew members, to anyone that has to spend a long time away from home. We every day, I will send videos to her as if she's kind of there, talking about my day and what's expected, how the day before went, see how she's doing. Hey, how did this thing go? But it becomes a lot more conversational, almost like you are there. And before you know it, you're talking for 45 minutes. And all of a sudden, you know, but then I get 45 minutes of really how she's feeling. It's not a text message. It's not you trying to decipher someone's tone or anything like that. It's as close as being able to be there with them as you can. Because sometimes, like Fall Guy, for example, we went from I think it was a 12-hour time difference to a 14-hour and back while I was there. And so even trying to FaceTime at times was impossible. You know, 2 weeks would go by before you're even close to being on the same schedule. And so we found a number of ways that we can help stay connected, that we can help support each other as best as possible. But it's never as good as the real thing. That's one of those sacrifices you definitely have to make. I was talking to a friend of mine I went to high school with, and he was talking about being away from home for 3 days. And it was tough. It was a really difficult thing for him. And I totally get that. I will never take that away from anybody, because 3 days away from your family is a lot. Just because we've made standard practice out of doing much longer stints does not make it any easier for that time to be shorter. And so I had told him, Cece will be back in August. And that was 4 months from when we were talking. And he said, "You're not going to see her until then?" I go, "Well, we'll probably get a chance to maybe see each other a weekend, but yeah, we'll see. You know, it's COVID time, so it's tough." And that all but brought him to tears. He couldn't fathom that being a part of your regular everyday life. And it is actually nice to get those check-ins, because you never want to be too good at distance. You always need to have that longing, and that you have to fight for your partner. You have to fight for life, really. If you're fortunate enough to really get deep into this business, you have to fight just as hard to keep your natural life and your relationship strong. And you have to do that actively and aggressively. But if you do that, and you find the right person that's willing to do that with you, it is possible to do.
In the fire service, if you work 30 years, you have spent 10 years away from your family. 10 full years. And that's not factoring in, you know, forced overtime and those kind of things. So a lot of departments, you're probably closer to, 15 years away from your family. So everyone on paper thinks, oh, we've got this amazing schedule. But if you actually do the math, it isn't. Now, don't get me wrong, it rotates. So you'll get to see your family after, 2 days, 3 days, whatever it ends up being. But I've been pushing for a work week that gives them more rest and recovery, and therefore puts them home more often. And now you've got a 72-hour period between these 24-hour shifts. And that's very, very important for the family dynamic. When I spoke to Steve Dunleavy a few weeks ago, he was talking about the kind of nuances between film and television. And it's interesting because it seems to be a big shift towards television now. But he said one of the things that's drawing a lot of cast and crew into the TV space was you can control the work week and you can do more of a kind of, Monday to Friday thing and be home with your family rather than be on location for months on end. So what have you seen as far as the evolution or devolution of the industry? And then, what are the pros and cons for the way it's shifting at the moment?
It's a deep question there, James. Well, I was really fortunate when I got into this business because I feel like I got to see the tail end of kind of the way the 80s and 90s were really done. The call-in services and, truly going to hustle a set, which is all but a lost art nowadays. I remember, paying into a call service or driving out to where they'd have the sheets or go get the binder, write everything down, and you've got your stack of headshots and you've got your you've got your paper cutter and staple gun in the back seat because I got to put a few more together before I go out. And that being a part of your 8-hour workday, finding a way to get near a base camp safely, get near a set, just get near a coordinator. And gosh, I made so many mistakes trying to do that. Won't say which show, but I ended up trying to hustle a show, and I ended up at base camp, and I was like, "Hey, I was just looking for the stunt coordinator," and the PA said, "Oh, get in this van. They're right over there." I should have never gotten in that van, but I was Kermit the Frog Green, and I got in that van. That could have been the career ender right there, but I got in that van and I went to location, and they go, "Oh yeah, and if you get in this elevator, he's right up there." Even telling this story, I'm like, "Stop! Don't do it." But so I get in the elevator, and I'm with a friend of mine at the time, and third guy gets in, and he steps in behind us at the button. Elevator closed, and he goes, "You guys look like stunt people." Like, oh, and honestly, I was like, "Ooh, I look like a stunt person." I'm just trying to do this thing, and I was like, "Oh, yeah." And he goes, "You guys here to hustle with coordinator?" And we're like, "Well, yeah, if he's around." And he goes, "He's kind of a dick. Honestly, you should probably just give me those." And I look at my friend, and I was like, "We don't know what we're doing." So we're like, "Okay," and we just hand it to him. And he goes to step out of the elevator, and he turns around and goes, "I'm the coordinator. Don't ever get in a production van again. But thanks for giving me your stuff." And he walks away. So he absolutely could have lopped our heads off. Absolutely. He had every right to, and he didn't. So I'm very grateful for that. But those kind of stories, it's not maybe that they don't exist, but they are so rare that you hear of those things. Because your hustle was the last thing you did. Your hustle was the last conversation you had. It was the relationship you built on that show, and just trying to create a community before social media, the internet at the time was a bunch of LL Bean catalogs essentially. And so there was not somewhere where you could go to find out what you needed to even learn. Like, I don't even know what I need to learn yet. Like, how do I do this thing? But the way that things have evolved, there is a lot more opportunities for newer generation to come in and learn those things in a safe space. Not always a safe space, but there are places. I do, and unbiasedly, I do refer people to Apex, my wife's space, because it is a clean, safe, non-judgmental space. You go there to fail, is what we always say. You go to Apex so that you can go there and fail and learn and fail again, learn and just keep doing it over and over again, because that's the best way you can do it. Now, I think it's a wonderful thing that there are more opportunities to learn. I do also want to remind that younger generation that this is a physical job. This is not something that is based on how good a person you are or what your best intentions are or the kind of things that you do. It's a physical job. And if you can't physically do the thing, you are by proxy unsafe. If you say I can jump 5 feet, but you can only jump 2, and we get to set, and the difference between safety and not is 5 feet, you are now an unsafe part of this show in this department. And so having the opportunities to learn are great, but there needs to be a realistic understanding that it's either going to take a long time, it could take a short time, or it might not be something that you physically can do. Because it is a physical job. And again, I never want to, if you've got a passion, fly, put jet fuel in your body and fly. But it is something that requires physicality to a certain extent, and oftentimes to an elite level, especially if you want to stay in this business. And so work hard, work hard, work hard, follow those classes, be prepared to be in more uncomfortable situations than you ever have, for a multitude of different reasons. But getting back to it, the way of approach has completely changed in the sense that now your social media is your resume in a lot of ways, because it's a very social business, obviously. And so I'd say probably 70% of the jobs that I've ever booked, I have booked through text message. It's not going to an audition or any of that. It's that you've hustled that person, or you've shown that person in person what you can do, or you've worked for them before and they appreciate your approach, your professionalism, whatever it is. And they just, hey, I got a show, come on out. Now, when you talk about specialty stuff, social media is a resume. Staying present in a coordinator's mind, nowadays that is a social media thing. And so that can be good and bad, because social media is essentially your resume becomes, look at me, look at me, look at me. Whereas when I got in, we are ninjas. We work in the shadows. We go to work. We do our thing. It's not about this. It's about this. So social media, I think, has been a nice gift. It is certainly seen. It has shown people that things they didn't think were possible are. But it also feels a little icky at times to be like, hey, I need a job, so you have to look at me. Look at the cool stuff I did. Look at the cool stuff I did. Where it's just like, I want my work to speak for itself. I don't want to have to put a poster and an arrow pointing to me. And so in that regard, that's a very different way that you have to go about finding work nowadays.
What about the medium itself? I'm actually developing a TV show at the moment from the 2 books that I've written, and I will get to that in a little bit after we hit stop. But I find it very exciting, the shift towards streaming. I think the films still have a place, and I think people getting together in a large theater and eating popcorn and having jump scares or watching action on widescreen, I think there's 100% has a place. But I think we all can acknowledge as well that there are some things that are made that they're probably just best to go straight to television. But you have the streaming series now, which all of a sudden, as you said, the 80s and 90s, it used to be, well, we need to keep you captivated, so we're going to have this kind of cliffhanger after the first 8 minutes and then cut to a 4-minute commercial. Well, that's all gone now. So you can eliminate all that cheesy kind of, build up with the drums and all that stuff, and just tell the damn story how it's supposed to be. And episode 1 can be 47 minutes and episode 2 can be an hour and 15, because that's how long it takes to actually tell that story. So I find that medium very exciting. What is your perspective on that? I know it's kind of a strange time at the moment. All of a sudden we have Hollywood actors selling Verizon phones that we never had before, for example. So clearly there's some sort of deficit void going on at the moment. But, what is your perspective of, where the industry will be next? And, what are the exciting elements of these innovations once everyone finds their feet again?
Well, today, June 25th, 2026, film is down in the United States, film is down universally, my understanding, by about 40%. We are just not making as much of it currently, June 25th, 2026. I know, especially for the United States, we are feeling that very much. Georgia is a little bit of a dusty old town right now. A lot of big empty stages. And there's all sorts of factors that have played into that, which we don't have to get into. But I do find it exciting in the sense, even with all that factored in with the streaming platforms, because it feels to me like a bit of a film renaissance right now. Like all the kings and queens have gone on their summer vacation. They've gone to the summer cottage, but they've left all of these amazingly talented crew behind, which I think is their own fault. Because now you have, like I said, the project I'm currently working on, we have such an amazing veteran crew. It is astonishing. I mean, people that have worked in this industry for 40 years and just have absolutely continued to just crush it in some of the most notable and noteworthy projects that you've ever heard of. And so it's a huge gift right now to have those kind of people around, because not everyone is busy, which we're not happy about. But they're not busy with the bigger stuff, which makes them available for the personal kind of projects. What A24 started as, which now obviously A24 is one of the biggest indie studios on the planet, if not the. But there's far more opportunity nowadays, I feel, for that, for the people that are so used to contributing to the story, are writing their own stories, and now there's a gap to show them, to produce them, to make them. And so I think in one way we are living in a very exciting time where there is lots of opportunity, like you said, across the streaming platforms. You don't fall into, you have to be at 27 minutes, 27 minutes or bust. That's it. You have to fall at 24 minutes, whatever your block is, whatever your commercial breaks used to be. You don't need that. And so not only are you, like you said, you're restructuring the way that story is being told, but kind of the way that you want to build your arcs throughout those shows. You could have an arc in a single episode because they go, well, we don't have enough for 2, but you just barely got enough for 1. Well, now that's a 3-episode arc, because like you said, you can do 40 minutes on this episode, 100 minutes on that episode, whatever it is, however you feel the best way to tell that story is without those restrictions. And so I do think that there is a wonderful bit of opportunity that we have not seen in a long time within the film industry. In opposition, we know that it is far more difficult right now to make film in other ways, far more difficult to make a living doing film and television right now because so many of the kings and queens have left. But I try to focus on the other side of it because I did find myself, especially after we'd gone through the strike and kind of learning a little bit more about how that had gone. It was difficult for a short time. It was difficult to justify going to work, not in the sense of like, why am I going? It's to go to make money and do this thing, but what is it for? There's so much bigger stuff going on in the world, and now I'm going to go play fight with my friends. Like, this feels so superfluous. What am I doing? But my wife reminded me something. In the Renaissance, in the days of old, when the people were pushed to their limits, when whatever it was, famine or war, whatever was going on at that time, that's when the arts were the thing that combined people, that brought them together. That's when some of our most impactful artists came to light. That truly is when you saw the most creative and powerful reaches across, or reaching out to other people, to the rest of the planet, and that wonderful bit of expression in the most unique ways. And it happened underneath that pressure. And so I do feel like we're in a bit of those times right now for, from a number of different factors and angles. We are in a bit of a pressure cooker. And this is when some of the most beautiful and impactful art can be made. And my wife reminded me of that. And so we might be going to, play fight with my friends, as I like to say. But we are telling stories, especially I feel like if you're part of a fight, you have the most opportunity to continue to tell a nonverbal story in film and grab the audience even more just with how you perform that thing. And that kind of helped reinvigorate my energy for this whole thing, and into my own writing and my own projects, and trying to get those things made. Um, so it's not great in the sense that there's not enough work for people right now, but it is a wonderful opportunity to give those amazingly creative people an outlet that they might not normally have had it not been for the circumstances we're in. You know.
I couldn't agree more. And I think what's really interesting is story was also used to impart knowledge, wisdom, experiences, lessons learned, and the danger of rehashing, Spider-Man 12 or whatever it is that you're missing that. And you look at, The Pit, Euphoria, Band of Brothers, and then, Shawshank and Green Mile and, Crash. Like when the credits roll, you're a different person emotionally. They've sowed seeds in your mind and you're starting to think about this. And this is what I'm doing with my show. Not to make this about me, I'll keep this very brief. But no one, when you look at a firefighter on television, it's a model that runs into a building, seems to be able to speak perfectly clearly, comes out with the baby, and everyone applauds. They miss the entire point. Yeah, exactly. We just covered with some sweat and a little soot on their face. They miss the point. The most important part of the first responder story is we get to see society how it really is. Because whether you are a billionaire or you've been living under a bridge with a needle in your arm, you're still pushing the same three numbers. And we are possibly the last people that you see. So the human story in the uniform is really where there's a massive void that I'm hoping we can bring to the screen. So when people see, yes, this is this profession that people admire, the takeaways that are going to come from that, and there's going to be a separate project that will be attached to it, people will then, hopefully when the credits roll, have been moved and also have that thought of, I'd never thought of it that way. And I'm going to start looking into that thing. So I think this is where maybe, there's the next version of a lot of storytelling is back to how it originally was. Sometimes it can be mindless. Sometimes you just want to shut down and watch something. I love martial arts films and, action films, but there's also a yearning in the soul for story to really move you, and if you're going to, have a horror type film, well then, as Stephen King did, with Shawshank and Green Mile, that there's a way to still have that human element attached to it. So I find it very, very exciting, but I think we've kind of lost our way, as you said, in the 80s and 90s, where it became very two-dimensional, even though there was some phenomenal, stories told, where they lent into, well, just, make them laugh, make them go ooh, ah, and then, they'll pay the tickets, rather than you got someone for 90 minutes that's watching you intently. Give them something that they can take away. And I think that, I hope, will be something that we see more of.
That was wonderfully put. No matter where you're from, you're hitting the same three numbers. It's true. It can be, daunting, no matter when you're trying to accomplish something like that, going after a TV show, film, whatever it is. Daunting, scary. Holy cow. And I think the financial side right now of trying to do something like that is kind of the scary part. So if you can get that side figured out, you're going to be able to get a wonderful, amazingly talented crew right now, especially here in the States, because I think something that everyone is facing is outside of the things that go along with not having enough work. Your bills, you're worried for your finances, for your family, their safety. But it's trying to make sure that what you're doing is not only worth doing, because sometimes, isn't that the biggest question you always have? You're writing something, you're like, why am I doing this? And you want it to be worth it. You want to leave people with some semblance of inquisition, of just trying to not be leaving a theater without being certain. I think is one of the best things you could do for somebody. It's just kind of something that is a little open-ended, but yes, there's tons of opportunity. As long as you've got that finance figured out, you've got your crew, and you've got an excited crew, because they need that creative outlet. That's where I was getting my growing up and feeling like I'm not an intelligent person. I'm just not intelligent. I'm a creative person. Well, no, we are intelligent when we are shown and we learn in the right way and we figure that out. But also there is an aching for that creativity. Even for us, some people, and some people might think like, how creative is it to choreograph that? There's only so many ways you can hit a person. Well, it's not about the punches and kicks. It's about the storytelling you're doing within that, and that is the tangible creative side of. It's not crosshook. It's every bit of emotion that started from frame one in the first act finally coming to fruition. It is no longer a punch. It's everything. And so being able to portray that in our action side is a massive palate cleanser. It is dessert at the end, or it's dessert first, depending on how you like to do it. But yeah, it's a wonderful opportunity right now to do a lot of things, and as long as we can support each other, and that's something my wife and her business, they're adamant about. She's created a lot of different ways that we can all check in on each other. Because we know everyone is struggling and everyone wants to put that best face forward, and no one really wants to ask for help, but we know that everyone is struggling right now with something, with someone, or whatever it might be. And so as long as we can support each other and we can nurture that creative place, we may be in the best version of the Renaissance right now. It's entirely possible.
Absolutely. I truly believe that there is a renaissance of kindness, compassion, community, service coming back. I think the pendulum has swung so far one particular direction, and so far the other direction was no good either. But the silent majority in the middle, I think that's where we need to find ourselves. And I've said this, my generation was raised in the UK. The TV shows that I watched as a kid talked about kindness, and we would do fundraisers for the kids in Ethiopia that were starving, and Rwanda, and all these different things that were on our screens. And you had Comic Relief and Live Aid, and here you had Bob Ross and Mr. Rogers. Like, that was who we're supposed to be, and that's where I think we're going to get back. And that's what what I'm writing is going to do the exact same thing. If you've got time, I got one more area I want to explore before we go to some closing questions.
Of course.
Brilliant. All right. So the pirate stunt show I did, I was that back then I was the hero. I was the blue pirate. And one of my friends who did the same role, there was, I told you, a sword fight up on the mast, and then you would kind of climb down into the crow's nest, get shot, and then do a fall. I'm not going to call it a high fall and insult the stunt industry. It was a fall into a mat. But it was a little bit precarious, and he kind of got hung up, ended up bouncing off the crow's nest, landing in the pit, but missed the mat, landed on the concrete and broke his back. Thank God he rehabbed and he was okay. But it is a very dangerous profession at times, and there's been, near misses as accidents. There's been tragedies with, firearms and some other things. Through your career, what have been some of the near misses that you've experienced?
Well, I count myself pretty lucky. I was doing Abe Lincoln Vampire Hunter, everyone's favorite movie.
I love documentaries.
It was such a blast to work on. so factual, but no, it's such a trip to work on. But working on that film, I had my first kind of debilitating injury on that film, and I was doing some parkour in a gymnasium, and I go over and I end up going into some spring floor on my left shoulder hard. And like I said, I hadn't really had too much injury before then. I'd had some slight tears, some tweaks, sprains, things like that. And I remember I get up and it feels like someone's pouring cold water on my head. And I was like, uh-oh, I don't know what this feeling is. And so I walk into the bathroom and I go to actually splash some cold water on my face. And I go, and I look at myself in the mirror, and this shoulder is like that. And I was like, uh-oh. So I walk out of the bathroom, and Dave McCumber is actually standing there. And I go, hey, does this, and I don't even finish the sentence. He goes, oh, shoot, you separated your shoulder. And I was like, I didn't even know what that meant at the time. I was like, separated, what does that mean? And so, long story short, I ended up going to the ER, and he goes, so you did the worst version you can. Of course I did. What did I do? And he goes, so it tore, but more like taffy. And I was like, what does that mean? He goes, so it like a violin bowstring, when a guy's just like hammering on it and some strings just start to like pluck off, but it's still a bowstring. So that's what you did. You stretched it, and then they went clink, 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 and a bunch of them went. But you still have a bunch of connection, but you have a lot of not connection as well. And so, two options. I can give you this piece of fabric that's in the shape of a figure eight, and you can wear it to hold your shoulders up as much as possible, and you just grin and bear it. Or we can put you under the knife, we can cut it, reattach it, and do the whole thing. And I went, I'm on a show. I have to work. Neither one of those are options. He goes, well, one of them has to be. And I go, all right, well, I'll take the strap. And so my boss looks at me, and he's Mick Rogers, absolute legend in the business. Second unit, directed Braveheart, doubled Mel Gibson for many years. Badass, Dukes of Hazzard. The man has broken every bone in his body. But he looks at me and he goes, I can give you the next 2 weeks pretty light work, but that at the end of that, I need you for that fight. Went, understood. And so for the next 2 weeks, I just, ice and did the whole thing. And luckily it worked enough, but it still just sits up there like this. But that was the first kind of time where I was like, oh, I need to make sure I'm a little bit more careful, because I was 21 years old, I think, maybe. And so I was rubber. I was invincible. And so that was the first time I was like, oh, I need to be more careful about this. I count myself lucky. I've torn my bicep. I slipped ribs in my back pretty regularly. It's just I've been doing that since I was 16. I had a hard slip in one of my ribs, and so on any given day, it can just go out. I used to actually have an opposite curvature in my neck. You know how your neck is supposed to go this way? Mine actually used to go like that. So I did a ton of chiropractic to help correct that. And so I think that has really actually helped protect my neck, because I've done so much work with it to keep it nice and strong. But yeah, I've had a few little moments here and there. I actually, right now, as I sit here, have bruised ribs. And I'm pretty sure I have 2 rib heads sitting out. But stuff like that seems to just kind of happen somewhat regularly. I will say my least favorite of all the types of injuries are ribs. Cracked and bruised ribs are the worst. To anyone out there that has never done it, because you can't do anything for it. So it just sucks, and you just get half your breath, and that's just what it is. But yeah, I've been pretty lucky. Separated shoulders. Tearing this, spraining that. I've had some weird ones. I didn't know it was possible you can double dislocate a single finger joint. I'll tell this story, even though it's kind of embarrassing. I don't care. I was on Punisher working for Tom Williams. He was kind enough to bring me in for the second half of that show for the first season. And so I was doing a stair fall, New York stair fall, just falling back. And as I get to the back end of the stairs all the way to the wall, cameras up above us, you can only see my feet. And so I'm aware of that. So I do the stair fall and I hit the wall and I look up and I just see where they're at. And I look down at my hand, and this finger is pointed that way. And I'm like, how the hell did I do that? Didn't feel it, was completely unaware of it. They go, cut. Tom Williams comes out and he goes, Justin, you good? And I look up at him and I just go like this with my hand, and he could see my finger just pointing the wrong way. And he goes, come on up here. And we go up and we go to head over to the set medic. And we're trying to make sure this isn't really a big deal. I've reset my finger before, but he goes, hey, let's have the set medic look at you. And so we walk up and we're just kind of like, hey, because I have more work to do that night. I have like 2 more wire gags to do. And so, hey, I was just wondering if you could help me out with this. And I just show him my hand like that. And he goes, whoa, 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 I can't touch that. And it just makes a huge to do about it, which is his prerogative. It's his job. And, it's not mine. So, but that means now Marvel is looking over and they're like, is he hurt? I'm like, oh no. So I start running away and I start looking for somebody that I know could reset my finger before they come find me. And so we had a number of off-duty cops on the show. And I was like, oh, hey. So I go hustling upstairs and I go, hey, is there any chance you could reset this? And the guy goes, I could try. And he gets like to here. And I hear Tom Williams' voice. Justin? Yes, sir? Come walking back down. He goes, Marvel's going to make you go to the hospital. To the hospital? And he goes, just get in the van. And I go, oh, because he knows I'm bummed. And he knows I want to finish the night. I don't want him to have to make an adjustment for me. I want to do my job. And so I get to the hospital and they're like, oh, well, we're going to have to do an x-ray. And the longer your finger or joint sits out, the worse it is to try to get it back in, or the harder it can be. And so like 45 minutes has gone by. I do all the x-rays. The x-rays are actually really funny. I should send them to you. They're pretty funny to look at. And the doctor finally goes, okay, it's time. Let's get this finger set. This was the funniest part of the whole thing. He goes, okay. And we'll just get that set back for you. And he's sitting there for probably 35 seconds. Just like, it feels like he's got a foot on my forehead kind of thing, like pulling on and finally it goes. Jeez. Okay, cool. Can I get back to work? So I managed to get them to write a little thing that goes, no hand-specific stunts for the night. Great. I can go back to work. So I walk in, take the splint off my finger, and I walk up to Tom and I go, hey, so where are we at? And he goes, come here. He walks around the corner and he goes, Marvel Legal would like for you to be wrapped for the evening. You can come back to work tomorrow, but they feel like it's too big a risk, and so you need to be wrapped for the night, which was devastating to me. I hate doing that. If you hire me for a job, I have to do the job. There's no in between. There's no halfway. I have to do the job, and so that like wired my brain wrong. But that meant that my dear friend Jefferson Cox, who was doubling Ben on the show, he could step over and he did those gags for John Bernthal, which was great for him as well. So it all worked out in the end. But the kicker was that Marvel said, hey, you can't work tonight, but you can work tomorrow, which I don't think they knew what my work on the following day was when they said that, because my work for the following day was being on a zip line, hanging by this hand, sliding across 2 buildings. And so they're like, it's too dangerous tonight, but in 6 hours, it won't be too dangerous. I'm just doing that. But yeah, I've been pretty fortunate, separated shoulder, slipped ribs, torn a number of things. Mom knows about most of them. But no, I've been pretty lucky. I've worked with some wonderful teams, and I trained myself up to try and see the angles, as I like to say. So I've been able to keep myself pretty safe for the most part.
I had my ribs separated by a white belt in jiu-jitsu doing a drill, and his perception of the drill was you're trying to win the UFC heavyweight championship and go. And so he has a triangle, guard and pops 2 of my ribs, and I try and go back in, I pop them back in, try and roll again. I'm like, okay, this isn't going to work. But it's funny you say with a separated shoulder, not anywhere near the level of gymnastics that caused this. But when I worked in Japan doing training for the Terminator 2 show, Dale Dye was teaching us a boot camp for 2 days, the one that did the boot camp for Band of Brothers and Private Ryan and all those. Yeah. And so we're the T-1000. So they'd say, all right, you've been frozen by liquid nitrogen. If you get in this little kind of role-playing thing, if you get hit by this cup, then you've frozen and you got to fall. Well, I just froze and fell. Yeah. Not thinking, this is from standing. This is not from any height whatsoever. But I just went straight on my shoulder. And we're talking, I haven't even done day 1 of the stunts yet. And I separated my shoulder, not to the level of yours, but whatever like the middle separation is. But yeah, had to basically
middle
just
break.
hide that
Yeah.
injury. And you're taking gunshots, so you're throwing your hand back every time you're getting hit, and oh god, it was brutal. So I can totally relate what you're talking about on a lesser level. All right, but
Shoulders are a factor. Shoulders are a factor, man. Once you do one bad one to that shoulder, you're always compensating for it.
yeah, yeah. Even today in the gym, we do mace work and stuff, and it's helping a lot. It really is. But it used to be pinchy pressing overhead, and I'm 52 now. I heard it 25 years ago. So yeah, they're a bitch. All right,
could have been yesterday.
Exactly. Well, let's go to some closing questions then. The first one I love to ask, is there a book or are there books that you love to recommend? It can be related to our discussion today or completely unrelated.
It's one that I haven't finished it, but there's been, referring back to kind of the sacrifices that can go along with this job and not getting to participate in life as much as you'd like to sometimes. That can make some of the typical milestones of life, the unavoidable things that happen, like when a family member might be sick, or unfortunately may pass away, or a dear friend, or God forbid it might even happen at work or something like that. But it's always been a bit of a gray area. I don't feel like I've ever really gotten from another performer a go-to kind of coping mechanism or a way to kind of approach those kind of things in life. And so there is a book I recommend called Die Wise. I definitely recommend it for anyone that may be dealing with loss or are approaching, unfortunately, some impending thing that is coming, but you can't do anything about. But it is a very kind of raw approach to preparing yourself for those inevitable days that will come. Called Die Wise. Really recommend it.
Beautiful. I got a father in palliative care at the moment, so maybe I need to send him a copy.
I'd recommend it. Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you. All right. Well, what about film, television, documentaries? Any of those that you love?
That's a big one. I should have prepared for that question. There is one film actually in particular that whenever I'm asked this question, because it is not a particular action film, but it sits so high on my shelf. It's called Lucky Number 11. With Josh Hartnett, Bruce Willis, Morgan Freeman. The cast is amazing. And its biggest, most common critique it got, which is funny to me, was this film is too smart. This film is too good at what it's trying to do. But it's an amazing mystery drama. It's super inquisitive. Lucy Liu plays a wonderfully interesting character in it that just kind of comes out of nowhere. And I've probably seen that movie 1,000 times. It's actually, so what I used to do when I was learning that I would double somebody I'd never met or worked with before, I would watch their old TV shows and films to see how they walked. Because matching someone's walk is to me kind of like the basis of starting to match their motion. How they walk translates into how they step into a stance, how they might even just stand. And then ultimately translate into that. And so when I was getting geared up to double Josh for the first time, I watched Lucky Number 11 and a number of other films that he did. And I just fell in love with it. Every time I watched it, I learned something new, saw a different camera angle, a different way that they actually subtly told this sub-story or solved this storyline. Amazing movie, Lucky Number 11. TV series, that's a tough one. If I had to go absolutely no action, it would probably be Home Improvement, a very old TV show. Tim Allen. It is absolutely dates itself. There's a lot of things in it where you go, oh, That's not the way it is anymore. Uh, that's not the way we should even be perceiving things, but we did at the time. Um, but that was one of those like Full House style coming of age shows that I just, that was, I learned a lot about myself, about things that I wasn't experiencing in my small town of Massachusetts, but was certainly valuable to see. But a lot of those shows were, Fresh Prince. Oh man, so much from Fresh Prince. Love that show. Let's see, an actual action one though. I feel like such a not stunt guy right now. I mean, I can't leave Hooper off of my film list. Hooper is just when it comes to a stunt person getting big opportunities, and for better or worse, Hooper is Hooper, and there will never be another one like it. Love seeing that movie for action. Two-person. I actually had pitched to Chris O'Hara because we were talking about trying to pay as much homage to the OGs, to the originals as we could. And so when they were gearing up to have Logan do that massive jump at the end of the movie, I looked at Chris and I went, it would be a wonderful throwback to Hooper if, say, there were two stunt performers in that car. And he looked at me and he went, no, you cannot sit in the car while Logan jumps this gap. No. And I was like, well, I had to ask. I had to try. Documentary. A documentary. It's funny because now, I feel like there used to just, every year there might be maybe 5 that came out. And now every year there's 500 documentaries that come out. That would be a tough one. Although I would put it in a genre. I love documentaries that follow nature or history. Anytime that you're discovering more about this planet, because we know so little. I love the idea that we know so little about the ocean, yet it's half of this planet. There's so much about it that we don't know. And so that kind of kicks an inquisitive nature in me, and anything to hear Morgan Freeman do voiceover, honestly. So
my sister edits for British National Wildlife Television, so she's worked with David Attenborough and a lot of stuff for the BBC.
Oh, wow.
And it's interesting because as a tie-in, I've had this conversation on here a few times. There's times where she's worked with American companies, and the way it's been described, to paraphrase, is you're going to have to dumb it down. And it made me realize, and you just kind of said this with the difference in home improvement, and even as I talked to Charles Johnson the other day, who's a script writer, the commercial breaks, but also the commercials themselves. Like, you look at some of these commercials, like, God, someone went into a boardroom and said, I'm going to be dressed as a chipmunk and I'm going to tell this god awful joke, and then people are going to buy my cheese or whatever it is. And you're like, how did someone say, I love this idea, here's $10 million, go make it? Right. But it just made me realize that I think, again, taking the positive, taking where this could go, and I think we're seeing it now, again, with Euphoria, with The Pit, with some of these, higher brow shows that are really, being well received, is I think the audience has been patronized for many, many years, and they've been perceived as, they won't get this, this is too smart for them, dumb it down, round the edges, whatever. And, I think that's a disservice to television and film in some areas for a long time. And I think that's what you're starting to see, which HBO has done for a long, long time, is that, no, just tell the story. Just tell it as it is. Don't make the cop all of a sudden, need to have some affair with this, but just let the cop be a cop, whatever it is. So I'm excited to see the audience given a lot more credit and allow the story to just tell itself, rather than, we need to taper it down because I don't know if everyone's going to get it. Well, not everyone needs to get it. Just tell the story and let the people that engage with it be moved by it.
Yeah. What is it? Severance. What a phenomenal take on, a very creative concept, but I think that show is so good because, yes, they have this kind of really cool way to continue to tell the stories about, these singular people that are two characters and everything that goes behind it and all that stuff. But there's a simplicity that everyone can connect to. So you take this kind of very out there concept, but you bring the emotional level and you just drop it right in everyone's lap every week, and they can connect with it in some way, shape, or form. And massive props to cast, crew, everybody on that show. But again, I think it's an example that falls in line with the shows that you mentioned, that it's highbrow stuff. It is worth putting full production value and backing behind these concepts. They can absolutely be well received. And I guess my continuation of that would be, why wouldn't we? I know that when we're talking about all this money, and production companies are looking at the risk. If it's your job to make the thing for as cheap as possible, and everyone wants your job, how good are you gonna be at saving money? I totally understand that. But the art side of it, with just a little bit of that backing, we could create some of the most impactful and some of the most relief to people. I struggle sometimes. I go back and forth with, sometimes when you're doing a project, you are making a commercial for tourists. Sometimes when you're doing a project, you are truly trying to, you have something to say and you want that to be put out there, whether it is to inform, whether it is to give relief to someone going through something, or a group of people, or whatever the thing might be. But it really takes this much trust to combine those two things. But when the risk is this high, and most of who you're talking to in the creative department are more concerned with checkbooks than with quality or with impact, you lose those. And so it is very exciting to see a lot of higher budgeted shows truly just ingratiating themselves into the creative process, and the scary idea that, hey, some people won't get this. We know some people might not, but there's a massive audience that is hungry for it. And if we just start to go down this path, it'll all be worth it in the end, and we'll all be better for it.
The word false economy comes up a lot in a lot of things that I talk about, and people are like, we need more money for this. And you look, and it's normally not the case. We don't need more money to solve the health crisis in America. We need to take the money and put it into making people healthier, and there'll be lots of money left over for schools and fire departments and all those kind of things. And it's the same with what you're talking about. Yes, you put, $100 million into an action film, but if it didn't move anyone, and if it gets watched once and that's it, what's the value of that production versus Band of Brothers, which I learned having one of the cast members on. I think it was released on September 7th, 2001. So most people don't realize that it came out right before the towers fell. And so they put all that effort in, and, it didn't really get its kind of visibility until the 10-year anniversary. I've watched that series 5 times now, easily, maybe 6. That's the difference between, something that's cheap and something that has value. And I think we got those skewed. If you put your money into something that's really going to move people, even from a financial point of view, people are going to demand to see it on streaming or whatever it is, and it's going to get watched and watched and watched, and it's going to create conversation, and it's going to lead then to someone wanting the same company to do something else for them, right? Not a similar story, but another story. So I think that, that false economy, even in Hollywood, you see it. Yeah, you made a film. Yeah, it was on Netflix. People watched it once, and then maybe made it to the end, maybe made it 10 minutes in. The last 2 Mark Wahlberg films, and I like him a lot. I didn't make it 10 minutes. I'm like, this is awful, absolutely awful. And no disrespect to him, because he does great work normally, but it's these companies saying, well, we'll just put Mark in, we'll make some action, and we'll put it out. But that's not creating value for the viewer or for the, the cast and crew either, because they don't want to go in, with something that isn't received well. They want to, if they're going to leave their family for 3 or 4 months at a time, they want it to be worth it. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the paycheck is not. I don't think the paycheck is why anybody stays in film and television. Yes, that paycheck can be good, depending on what your jobs are and the department you fall in and things. But you have to be just a little bit cracked to stay in this business, in my opinion. And you have to actively be hungry for a creative outlet, and you need to really be satiated by that work in some way, shape, or form, or you're not going to make it. You won't last. It'll become too empty of a gesture to you to even do, and the passion will be gone. You'll be resentful for the career that bought you your house. Yeah, so I think it would be great for that financial thing to be universal, for it not to say, yeah, you have to have $100 million, well, because you have to outbid that person for that release date, and you have to do this for this distributor, and you have to do that for, well, and so all in total, your 10-minute short will probably cost you about $4,000 over $10 million to make, but we don't need to, especially with the social media, getting things out there. It's really is such a mass opportunity. Like we've been saying, it's the Renaissance, and to be able to control more of the narrative and maybe not have as much money, but make something worth making, is have something to say. And that's the big thing, I think, that all the way from, like you said, your audience just becomes numb to it because you have nothing to say. Yeah, you've flashed a bunch of lights in my face for 2 hours, but I'm not changed by it. I'm not going to think about this tomorrow. I'm not going to be able to describe the ending of this movie to a dear friend in a week because it didn't touch me at all. It's important. The most important, I think. What's the point otherwise? What are we doing?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, the next of the closing questions, is there a person that you'd recommend to come on this podcast as a guest to speak to the first responders, military, and associated professions of the world?
Probably 20 people come to mind. I'm going to give you two. I'm going to say, because he was the coordinator for Dark Wolf and a number of other shows, very military based, and an absolute loudspeaker and lover of all of our servicemen and women, and everyone that does any of these selfless jobs. And that's ultimately what they are: firefighters and police officers and our military armed servicemen and women. I'm going to say Tom Williams. I think he would be a wonderful person to have on the show. A true veteran. He has done so much in this industry, and he will have some amazing stories. But yes, all the shows he's ever worked on that are military based, he does everything he can to not just make sure that what is being portrayed is accurate, but he wants to get the actual guys that do it, the guys that did it, because that is a very small way that we can say thank you, is to bring the people that actually lived these lives, get them paid, get them some respect, get them on camera, live in perpetuity, portraying what it is you really did, and really ultimately just give people a little bit of a spotlight, because we're all grateful, and sometimes we don't know how to show how grateful we are. But that's a small way that we can do it. And I know Tom actively always tries to do that. So Tom Williams is definitely one. And I would say, if you want a little bit more of a window into the mind of David Fincher, and honestly, as far as an approach, I have seen many people attempt, but he's been the most successful in this, would be Dave McCumber. Dave McCumber is a sponge. I have learned more from Dave. He's one of those people that is always trying to see ahead of the technology curve. What are people trying to use, and what are people trying to do? And so a quick example I'll use, when we were talking about trying to make more of our own pre-visualizations digitally. So if we needed to make something, say, for Transformers or for a Ninja Turtles movie or something like that, where we could do all of the motion, skin whatever that thing is actually onto us and show that as the previs. And so the first time Dave attempted to do that, he had 2 Xbox 360 cameras and a sheet in his garage, and he filmed himself doing all of the parts of, I think it was a 5-person fight, and skinned himself as different Transformers. And that is the beginning of him learning how to do visual effects. And now he is indescribably savvy. He is so good, and he's always trying to learn the next thing. And he's trying to make sure within doing that, he is actively trying to keep the human element at its core, at the center of all of that, and not give those jobs to a computer, to use that computer with a person at the helm. And and Dave's got a million wonderful stories. Both of the David Fincher projects that I have done were for David McCumber, and he coordinated both The Killer and Adventures of Cliff Booth, which will be out later this year.
Brilliant. Well, I appreciate both those suggestions. Thank you. The last question before I make sure everyone knows where to find you. What do you do to decompress?
There's a couple things. Depending on where I am, in activity, I like to do to try and decompress. And this is actually one that I just found last year. I had never played a day of it really before then. Tennis. I don't play tennis with a lot of people. And if I really just want to decompress, I go find a wall. I put my headphones in and I just tap a ball against a wall with a racket. And just being out in nature, out in the sun, is already something that I respond really well to. And so also to have a little fun activity at the same time, a little hand-eye coordination. So tennis is definitely one thing I do physically to decompress. My wife and I, we don't have kids, but we have two little kitties at home. And I'll say there's no faster way to get me decompressed and asleep than having an orange tabby laying on my chest and my wife laying next to me with a cat on her lap. That's a little gift that unfortunately with geography I don't get a lot, especially when we're out on shows. But if I can just be on the couch with my wife and our cats, I'm decompressed. I'm good.
Brilliant. All right. Well, for people listening, if they do want to learn more about you, reach out to you, where are the best places to do that online?
Well, I do have a Facebook, but I don't use it. So I would say Instagram, and my Instagram is Jeaton, Jeaton _, JEATON _. That's me on Instagram. I don't really use my Facebook, but Instagram, you can find me there, but that's really it.
Well, I want to thank you so much. We said 2 hours. We're scraping almost 3 hours of conversation, but this is what happens when you sit down with someone and be present. But we've gone all over the place, from obviously the incredible parenting that even gave you the drive to get where you are now to some of the stories that you've had in front of the camera. So I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much, James. It's a wonderful thing to go back and talk about it, and thank you for reaching out to even do this. It's a fun thing, and I know that there's a lot of people that are trying to either get in or are in and struggling, and so I hope if anything I had to share was helpful, it makes it all worth it.